All right, so I'm live, and I'm told that I don't need to wear a mask in my own home, so I guess I'll take this off. But yeah, so thank you for joining me this evening or this afternoon or morning if you happen to be in a different part of the world. A lot of people have suggested this. All right, so a lot of people have suggested me making this video. So I am doing it. I am going to go through every presidential election in American history and pretend that I was alive in that election. And I'm going to tell you my opinions on the candidates and say who I would have voted for if I was around at that time. And keep in mind a few conditions here. First of all, that you know, hindsight is 2020, as they say. So we are pretending like I'm living in that year and I don't know about what's going to happen in the future. Okay, so I don't know what's going to happen later down the road with Richard Nixon. All right, so keep that in mind as an example. Also, keep in mind that most people throughout all of history are rotten by today's standards. So, like, I just saw a comment. Felix, thank you for the super chat. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. Exactly. George Wallace there, in case you didn't know that famous line. Also, speaking of super chats, I'll take questions, Q&A like I normally do at the end of the live stream. So stick around for that. This will probably last a couple hours tonight, so I understand if you're coming and going, no hard feelings. I want to give a shout out to Dylan, who's a longtime supporter of my channel. He was in the chat earlier, and he gave me a donation, and he said he had to go. He was not able to make it, so maybe he can watch the recording later on. I'll keep this up on my channel, and you'll hear that shout out. Okay. Do you like the baby? What's with the baby memes? Thoughts on the baby convertible? It's grand. It's very good. Thank you for that comment, Ale Alva. But anyway, so if you are brand new to my channel, I'm Mr. Beat, and this channel is mostly known for presidential history, like American political history channel, although I do cover most of all of history because I'm interested in most of all of history except ancient history. I don't do ancient history, mostly modern history. But yeah, I have a geography series that's pretty big. It's my compared series, but for some reason a lot of people always come back to my presidential election videos and my president videos. And I do have songs about all the presidents. I mean, I'm kind of known on YouTube as the president's guy. Even though I don't think I'm necessarily any kind of expert or anything. It's just turned out I like presidential history. So I have got requests to do this type of video, how I would vote in every presidential election in American history. So we're going to go through them chronologically. I did, believe it or not, have to go back and look at my scripts, my notes. I even busted out my book. This is my book that I have available on Amazon if you want to buy it, by the way. I updated it for the 2020 presidential election. So it was hard to be objective, but I did the very best I could, just trying to give facts, try not to spin it too much, although we are all biased. But regardless, it's updated for 2020. I kind of went back and, refer to this because I haven't memorized every fact about every presidential election in history. I just have not. I try, and so, some of these may surprise you. I did take a few notes just so I remembered what to say, because sometimes I do these and I don't take notes at all and I just kind of speak off my top of my head, and I probably shouldn't do that. Before we get started on the very first presidential election, 1788 to 1789, Joe Miller, thank you. Literally grinning with joy at seeing this pop up. Hope you have a spectacular evening and cheers. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, this was a long time coming. It's kind of a random time to do it, but why not? A lot of students are in school need a little break from studying because you got another 6 weeks or 7 weeks left of school and you're like, oh, this is rough. Anyway, a shout out to Noah Brody, who's a viewer of the channel, who has already done this. Also, E Pluribus Unum, the channel E Pluribus Unum, we've been friends for a while on the internet. has also done this over on his channel. So go check those out as well. Oh, Lucas Morris, thank you very much. Says beat 2024. Is that for president or is that for something else? Or just me being alive in 2024? I hope I'm alive in 2024. I've said before on my live streams, being president myself would be one of the worst jobs ever. I think I would be miserable doing it. Thank you for all those folks I see that have bought the book already. That's amazing. Thank you so much. I did put the link in the description if you're interested. Mrs. Beat has told me that I am bad about promoting myself. So just to remember, like, I'm on all the social media stuff. I've been trying to like be more active on TikTok. So TikTok, check out my TikTok. It's just at I am Mr. Beat. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, believe it or not. What else? Oh, Cameo. I just started doing Cameo if you want me to give a shout out to someone, like for their birthday or something. I think that's it. Yeah, I don't know. I think those are the main ones. Anyway, so I have a website, IamMrBeat.com, and I have upcoming events, like I do a Q&A occasionally on different Discord servers. Oh, I have a Discord. That's the other one I was trying to think of. Check out my Discord server. Okay, this introduction's too long, so let's get into it. And I'll have disclaimers as we go. I have a Reddit as well. Yes. Okay. So let's go ahead and bring up everything. I want to make sure it looks all right on your end because I'm a one-man show here trying to produce. But just, again, we're going chronologically with the 1788 to 1789 election. And then we're going to work our way up. Oh, I know what I should say. We're not going to get to modern elections in terms of probably most of your lifetimes. I didn't want to do elections that I actually voted in. So some of you don't know this, but I am 39 years old, so I am what you call one of the oldest millennials around. I definitely don't identify with Generation X, so I guess I identify as a millennial. But anyway, the first election I ever voted in was the election of 2000, which was a very exciting election. So for this live stream, I'm not going to reveal who I actually voted for in every presidential election that I've actually voted in. So 2000 through the present, including that wonderful 2020 election. All right. Oh, I'm getting a comment here. Sounds like I'm in a tunnel or echo. I don't know. There's a weird echo. All right. I don't know what's causing that. I guess I could change mics, so that maybe. I was changing the settings and it all sounds like I'm in a tunnel or echo. All right. Don't know why it's doing that, but maybe I can just get rid of the filters. I'll just get rid of the filters here. Maybe that will help. Testing. Is there still an echo now? Because I was messing around with all these new filters, so. Some of you were saying, keep the echo. All right. I fixed it for a minute. Is there an echo now? No? Oh, in the meantime, thank you for Kyle Fentress. Just wanted to say fantastic series, very well researched and entertaining. Thank you very much, Kyle. It's good now. Okay, so we'll keep it as is, and we'll go through these. So the election of 1788 to 1789 lasted over many weeks because, of course, it took so long to actually just get messages delivered. So the results from local ballot boxes. All right, yeah. Well, a little bit of echo will be fine. Okay. So anyway, you all know that George Washington is one of my favorite presidents ever. And in this election, he was running against himself. So it was mostly a battle of who would be the vice president. So I'm also going to share who I would vote for vice president in these early elections. So obviously, I would vote for George Washington, like most everybody agreed with in 1788. So G-dubs all the way. And as far as there were like, I would say at least 10 serious contenders in this election to be the vice president. Remember that back then, whoever was vice president would be whoever got second place in terms of the votes. This is before the 12th Amendment. More super chats. Nina Turner, AOC 2024. Thank you for the donation. Gyra and Mango. Hello, Mr. B. Today's my buddy Nate the History fan's birthday. He's a Husker sympathetic to the Kansas cause and would appreciate happy birthday. Happy birthday, Nate the History fan. Okay, but back to this. So we got to stay on track here. So I'd still vote for John Adams. I think John Adams, he was, this is before, remember, knowing what he did as president. And knowing everything he accomplished before this election, very solid choice, okay? Very solid choice. Yeah, I forgot I was going to have the video play here while I was talking here. I was like, why not have this visual going on? So yeah, this was one of the only elections where it was unanimous. All the electoral votes went to George Washington, and sure enough, John Adams did get second place. It was coordinated that way, even though all these people were interested in it that you see on the screen right now. And yeah, that's who I would have voted for. I would have voted for George Washington, John Adams. Okay, so we're going to move on to 1792. All right. 1792 is one of those... it's similar to 1788, 89 because it's like, okay, everybody still loves George Washington. Everybody still wants him to stick around, even though George Washington himself is like, I don't want to do this. I want to retire. I want to go back to my plantation and just chill and maybe read some books and go fishing. But he was talked into running for a second term. I would, of course, voted again for George Washington. He didn't have any serious opponents again. Again, though, we had a mix of different choices for vice president. And a new name popped up, a man who was growing in popularity, and that would be the wonderful George Clinton. Not that George Clinton, not the George Clinton of Funkadelic of the musician of today. George Clinton here, let's see if I can find him in the video here. There he is. That George Clinton on the right. That's George Clinton. He was an anti-federalist, but also somebody that Federalists respected and got along with. So remember, the two big factions already in 1792 that had developed already were the Federalists, who wanted the federal government to have more power, and the anti-federalists, who wanted the states to have more power. And so Washington was the glue that held these two factions together, saying, hey, we can compromise Federalists and anti-federalists. Although Washington leaned Federalist. He never identified that way. He never was involved in a political party. He stayed, he hated political parties. But in fact, in his farewell address, he said that would be one of the downfalls of the country, were political parties. But regardless, I do like George Clinton. If you ever get a chance, research what he was all about, because he was a good leader. And very well respected and good ideas as well. All right, so we're going to move on now to... Oh, by the way, John Adams did get reelected as the vice president, so just so you know. 1797. Before we get to 1797, thanks for the super chats. Matthew Peleski, Adam gets too much hate. Yes, the Sedition Act was bad, but he handles the XYZ affair well. Only founding father president not to own slaves. I hear those points a lot, and they are good points, Matthew. Your mom. Thank you for the super chat, your mom. Hey, you should compare mid-sized cities that people may not know about. It'd be very interesting. For example, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Toledo, Ohio. Great suggestion. I have compared two college towns. One that I consider my hometown, Lawrence, Kansas, versus Ames, Iowa. So that's something where they're not even mid-sized. They're even smaller than mid-sized. So yes, I will eventually probably do more of that. Although they probably won't get the views as the other ones do. But oh well, who cares? It's fun to make them. Okay. The election of 1796 was the first truly competitive election here because now George Washington has said goodbye. I am really retiring this time and I'm not coming back. I'm hoping to set this precedent of just 2 terms, 8 years in the office, and then everyone else do the same. And so now there's a bit of a vacuum, although a lot of people think that John Adams is the favorite. John Adams, of course, I do respect him as a founding father. I mean, he wasn't necessarily always around there. He helped Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence. He was mostly doing diplomacy work in Europe in the 1780s. But yeah, as a vice president, very solid. Famously, him and Thomas Jefferson did not get along. They clashed. John Adams became a Federalist, Thomas Jefferson an Anti-Federalist, and then soon helping found a brand new political party with his buddy James Madison called the Democratic Republican Party that was more pro-states' rights, a more decentralized way of governing. So this is a classic already. We're seeing this this big clash of ideas in terms of the role of the federal government. Oh, I got more super chats here. Daniel Fitzpatrick, did Coolidge's lower taxes lead to the Great Depression? That's a complicated question. I don't think the short answer is no, I don't think so. Regulations is another thing of that, though. Jacob Ryan, thank you so much. No, not that, George Clinton. Hello from South Jersey, but off topic, would you do a vid on J.Q. Adams? I love that he went to Congress after he was president, where many say he got more accomplished. Yes, I would definitely do that. Elijah, thank you. You're a social studies teacher in real life, right? Yes, I am. Why are social studies teachers always so much cooler than the rest of them? Because we just are. What can I say? Mark Irwin, would you support RFK when he ran in 68? I'm not going to spoil 68 yet, okay? We'll get to that. And yes, I would make a video about RFK. I will say that I'm also a big fan of Bobby Kennedy for sure. Let's see. I think I'm all cut. Oh, political talk. Thank you. I have a video idea. Top 10 majority leader Senate in American history. Great idea. Gregory F. says Democratic Republican for life. Ty Halpern says, have you read all the presidential biographies? David McCullough, John Adams is my favorite. I have not read that one, but I've read his biography, of course, about Truman, and I read a bunch of other ones I won't get into now, but okay, we're moving on. Okay, the election of 1796, I vote for TJ. Thomas Jefferson. If I was around in 1796 with George Clinton as his running mate, even though George Clinton refused to run, he absolutely did not campaign, stayed home, was like, what are you doing? I don't want to do this. Stop it. I would still vote for Thomas Jefferson and George Clinton in 1796. Adams was solid. This would be a tough pick for me, but I think that I would have leaned more towards what Jefferson was saying. He had more, I would say, rhetoric that appealed to kind of standing up for the little guy, you know, like anti-elite rhetoric. All right, so that's kind of why I would go that direction for 1796. Okay, we got a really big one coming up here. The election of 1800. Yeah, this one is one of the most important presidential elections in history. The result was pretty much the revolution of 1800, as historians call it. It's pretty insane. All right, before I go through 1800, it looks like I have another super chat. So thank you, Ty, again. Oh, Reared3, is it true that your main account is in Facebook? Ask everyone to hold super chats till the end. Matthew says, yes, hold super chats to the end, please, so we can get through these. But I do appreciate the support, though. Okay, it is amazing. Hanky Plier, yes, you should run for president 2024 because why not? I would not want to, but that's really flattering that you would say that. Speaking of not wanting to, George Clinton, that's part of the appeal why I keep coming back to him. That's why, like, he refused to run in 1796. I tend to be biased towards candidates who are unwillingly thrown into it because, like, that shows to me that they are not primarily driven by their ego, that, like, you know, they think other things are more important because you'll see that looking at the psychology of many presidents in American history, there's a lot of ego involved with many of them. Anyway, before I get off track too much, the election of 1800. So we have a rematch. of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. John Adams won that election in 1796, and he had a very controversial presidency, mainly with the Alien and Sedition Acts, but he did some things right, like somebody in the chat mentioned the XYZ affair. Like he kind of still helped the Federalists and Anti-Federalists he compromised on some things. But yeah, I would vote for Thomas Jefferson again in 1800. This time, though, I would vote for the second place person to be not Aaron Burr, who you see on the screen right now. I am not a fan of Aaron Burr. I think he was pretty horrible in many ways. Not just the fact that he killed Alexander Hamilton, but no, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney is who I would have recommended be the. I don't know if there's a picture on him here. Maybe I'll just Google him. Oh, wait, is that him? Yeah, there, the lower right-hand corner there. That's Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. I thought that he was a good leader. I thought he would have made a fine vice president with Thomas Jefferson. And as you all know, Thomas Jefferson did win the election of 1800. And so I would have been happy. Not necessarily that happy with Aaron Burr. Actually, pretty upset about Aaron Burr and a little scared that he almost got the presidency if it weren't for Congress stepping in and fixing that. So thank you, Congress, for that. But people forget how close it was, how close Aaron Burr came to be the president in 1800. All right, so I'm going to move on to Rebecca Larson. Thank you. Can you ask us who we would vote for? Yeah, absolutely. As we're going through these, I would like for you, I forgot to say that, please put in the chat who you would vote for in these elections. So, for example, 1800, so Luigi says smile more? Okay, I'll smile more. This is very serious stuff, Luigi. So yeah, who would you vote for in these elections? Would it be TJ, Thomas Jefferson? Oh, I keep saying TJ is kind of cringy. But yeah, Thomas Jefferson or John Adams. All right, I think most people are going to say Jefferson, though. It's just kind of... I know, he owned slaves. I get it. All right, yeah, that's a horrible thing. Okay, we're going to move on to... It looks like most of the people are saying Jefferson, as I predicted. One person said Burr? Okay. Now we're on to the election of 1804. Thomas Jefferson is now the incumbent, has been president, fairly popular, although some thought that he overreached with his power, was a bit hypocritical with the Louisiana Purchase. You know what I'm saying? So who would you vote for in 1804? It looks like most of you... Kanye West. I saw Kanye West. Okay. I would vote, once again, for Thomas Jefferson. I think that he did a solid job in his first 4 years. And then this time, again, I would vote for George Clinton to be well, hold up. Are we at the 12th Amendment now? I think we are. So the 12th Amendment, yep, there it is. So they now have to have a running mate. So now you're voting for a ticket. So there's no more of this second place nonsense, all right? So yeah, it has to be Thomas Jefferson. I'm going to say it again. Thomas Jefferson and George Clinton. And yeah, let's keep it going. Things are getting better. Not that George Clinton. Yes, that one. Okay. All right, looks like most of you also are supporting the re-election of Thomas Jefferson in 1804. Let's go to 1808. Now, Thomas Jefferson decides to keep that tradition going of just 2 terms and then retire. So his BFF James Madison has basically the same views as him as well. So might as well just like push for him to take his place. 11 US, your videos inspired me to draw one of the presidents, Mr. Coolidge. That's awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, 1808. You know, it's not as easy as you think. I was a huge, I'm saying this as if I really was alive in 1808. But if I was alive in 1808, I would not be a fan at all of the Embargo Act. I think it is one of the worst pieces of legislation ever passed. And Jefferson signed that into law. I mean, it narrowly passed it. I think this is something that greatly damaged, there's George Clinton again, damaged the country. And Thomas Jefferson did expand the power of the executive branch in a direction I would be slightly uncomfortable with, and it was hypocritical. However, I would still be cool with you know James Madison, the the father of the Constitution, the main guy who wrote it, who wrote the Bill of Rights, for crying out loud. And so this would be a little closer. I mean, I like Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, and his running mate would be, there he is. Rufus King was his running mate. There's Rufus, another founding father. But I think the edge would go to James Madison and George Clinton again. And there we go. James Madison did win, despite the Embargo Act being such a disaster the year before. All right. Going on to the election of 1812. All right. The election of 1812, this was a much different time. A lot happened in 4 years. First of all, you got increasing tension overseas, like not just the Barbary pirates, but also the French and British up to shenanigans. And who should we go with more? It turns out the British were doing more damage. Those British sailors and the impressment of American sailors, plus what was going on out west, I would have been very concerned of that. Remember, I'm also pretending that I lived in Kansas back then, but Kansas didn't exist back then. So let's just say I lived in Kentucky. This new state of Kentucky, and I'm seeing what's going on. I'm going to be sympathetic to someone like Henry Clay. Now, James Madison didn't seem to do much to, kind of stand up to Britain. But now he's like saying, no, let's go to war with Britain. I'm conflicted, all right? I don't want to go to war with Britain. I think there's other ways to handle this because I think we'll get our butts kicked by Great Britain. But this is another tough election for me. But I think ultimately I'm going to want to see some change. I've given James Madison 4 years, and I'm not really that satisfied with how he recklessly led us into this war, even though maybe it was inevitable. But going back to war with Britain full on just seems a little outrageous and reckless. So I probably would have went with DeWitt Clinton and his running mate, Jared Ingersoll. DeWitt Clinton, there he is. The problem with him is he was kind of a typical politician. He just told people what they wanted to hear. But I would have been like, oh, that's okay. Let's just try him out. I'm not necessarily that excited about Clinton, but I was impressed with what he did, in government in New York, especially with building the Erie Canal. Well, you know what? This guy seems like a good, solid leader. He might be talking out of his you-know-what, but let's go with him and Jared, okay? So I was wrong. I would have been disappointed because James Madison would have been reelected. This War of 1812 would last 3 years. So let's go on to 1816, to a much more peaceful time. Oh, no. There we go, 1816. Don't jump ahead now. 1820. Okay, 1816 is after the War of 1812. Things of, the Federalist Party, of course, there's the Hartford Convention, where the Federalist Party just kind of shoots themselves in the foot, talking about, leaving the United States. Even some of them saying that there, even though if they weren't serious. But the Federalist Party decline is very rapid between 1812 and 1816. They were already going down. Before I forget, Aiden 22, thanks for the super chat. Robert Kennedy versus George Romney 68. Who would you choose? I would choose probably Robert Kennedy, but they're both great. But yeah, we'll wait to super chats till the end here. Thank you, though. 1816, I would go with James Monroe because Rufus King is kind of, at this point, kind of not that exciting. Not really giving any great ideas as alternatives. I'm going to stick with the Virginia crew here. I know Rufus King, maybe if he were to offer a better platform, but he didn't really. Like, a lot of the platforms were the same. Like, they kind of agreed. And I don't think King even wanted to be president really either. Although that should be appealing to me. But I think James Monroe was just this, really popular guy that I think I would have been cast under the spell. Plus, obviously good looking guy. So most Americans, right? We like to consider what they look like also when they run for president. Sad to say. I don't know. It's not that consequential of an election anyway, but the Federalist Party I would have been really disappointed in after the Hartford Convention and what happened during the War of 1812. So going with the Democratic Republican James Monroe. Looks like Rebecca again. Thank you. James Monroe is my great times 9 uncle, so I vote for him. Okay, then. I'm going to vote for your great, 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 great uncle. All right, moving on to 1820, where now James Monroe has been the president for 4 years, and we call this time between 1816 and 1820, even beyond the era of good feelings. I mean, the Federalist Party has collapsed. There's essentially just Democratic Republicans around, and things are mostly going all right. There's a little bit of ominous music playing because of the slavery issue creeping up because of the expansion of slavery. And then, of course, the economy starts to get a little crazy because the central banks are not always guaranteed, and the business cycle's up and down. It's a little scary. Anyway, 1820, though, we don't really, look, as you can see on the screen, we don't have any serious competition to James Monroe. So we're kind of just, and things are going well. We don't want to mess things up too much. I mean, I know there's the Panic of 1819. There's the issue of the expansion of slavery out west. What should we do with Missouri that wants to be a state? And I don't know. But the thing I like the most about James Monroe and why I would have reelected him in 1820 is he had a balanced cabinet that you just saw. He was a pragmatic guy and may have not been one of the best presidents, but was not somebody who was all about just him. He was like trying to work with everybody just to get the job done. So Monroe, who do you all think in the chat? Ben Shapiro? No. Fidel Castro? What? Monroe number 2? Yeah, looks like we're here. Most of you are saying Monroe again. All right, let's keep this going. 1824. This is one of my favorite elections to look at. It doesn't get much better than the election of 1824 in terms of drama. First of all, look at that, a 4-way race. A 4-way race. Holy crap. Okay, so we've got, the main dogs, Henry Clay, who by this time is like a shining star in Congress. William Crawford, not as much of a shining star, but very popular Southerner. John Quincy Adams, a popular Northerner, New England guy. And then Andrew Jackson, the war hero of the Battle of New Orleans, that last big battle of the War of 1812. And he was the hero that was like the underdog victory, the one really decisive victory the Americans had against superior forces. Andrew Jackson did not want to run for president originally. His wife, Rachel, was trying to talk him into not ever doing it because he'd been in Congress before. He hated Congress. Why would he want to be president? He was senator and he was representative, and he kept getting talked into it again. But he does not campaign, but a lot of people campaign for him, and it's looking like he's the most popular dude in 1824. Andrew Jackson is the supposed man of the people. He was hoping to be the first, quote, president of the common man. Got a couple super chats here. Jeremy Franklin, I'm a teacher. Mr. Beat equals teacher goals. Nice. Yeah. Go, Jeremy. Thanks for your service. Daniel Diaz, Jackson for the win. Okay. Yeah. Who do you think? Who would you vote for in 1824? Let me know. Looking like we're getting quite a bit of differences here. Somebody said the baby in 1820. I don't know. It's okay. One person said Crawford. A lot of Jacksons. Oh, never Jackson. A lot of people want Henry Clay. A lot of people want to see Henry Clay. The way I went about this election, if I was alive in 1824, I'm looking at basically, I'm not too excited about any of them. First of all, Andrew Jackson, I like his rhetoric, but I don't like who he is as a person. Like the fact that he's in duels and he has all these slaves and he seems kind of ruthless and he takes things personally, kind of short, ill-tempered, like, oh no, was he going to get us into a war with some random country? Because he's gotten us into conflict before when he was in the military. And anyway, so he's a bit of a firecracker, so I'm hesitant on Jackson. John Quincy Adams is your more, you know, been there, done that by this point. He's at least he's not from Virginia. He's from Massachusetts. He's the son of John Adams, of course. Smarter than his dad, I think, in many ways. More progressive. I probably would have been. I think I just hated the fact that he was kind of this insider, kind of this elitist type. That's the biggest turnoff for me. William Crawford, pro-slavery guy. No real huge accomplishments. A solid leader, but I'm not that enthusiastic about him. Henry Clay is probably, I would say, the most. I would say the most experienced already at this point, and level-headed and willing to work with different people with different opinions, except for Jackson. He hated Jackson. So yeah, I would just say this would be a tough one. And we all know what happened. It did not have a clear majority winner in the Electoral College, and so it had to go to the House of Representatives. And of course, how it ended up was John Quincy Adams and what was later seen to be a quote corrupt bargain by Henry Clay's maneuverings to get John Quincy Adams as the guy. And so I didn't know this would happen afterwards. So remember, going to the polls on election day, I didn't know what Henry Clay would do afterwards. So I would actually say maybe if I could somehow just write in, I would vote for John Quincy Adams, and I would say Henry Clay as maybe the vice president. That's what I would try to hope for, even though they didn't run quite as a ticket that way. So that's kind of my weird one. So what did you all say? A lot of people are still saying Clay in the chat. Looks like a few John Quincy Adams. 11 US again. Here's a drawing if you want to see. Okay, yeah. I'll if you want to all check that out. Right on. Okay, it looks like Weird Al, 1824. Yeah. I think so from the chat it seems to be most of you are either John Quincy Adams or Jackson, and those were the first and second place in the Electoral College and popular vote if I remember correctly. So yeah, I would say, yeah, those are my two guys. I would be frankly scared of Andrew Jackson. Part of me would be like, I do like the way he talks about like returning power to the common man, fighting to expand democracy. But again, a bit of a firecracker. All right, next up is the 1828 election. Before I get there, it looks like Cowboy, thank you. Respectfully, I would vote for Adams because he didn't own slaves. I'm interested in hearing you about President Grant. I will tell you about him. Yeah. Also, the fact that John Quincy didn't own slaves, and that's a big thing that really. In fact, John Quincy Adams wanted to get rid of slavery, and he was one of the earliest ones to support ending the slave trade, and influential with the Amistad case as well. You might Google that. I have a video about that. All right, so the election of 1828, we've had 4 years of John Quincy Adams, and the problem is the mood is shifting in the direction away from John Quincy Adams. Plus, more and more men, white men, can vote, and they don't even have to own property to vote in most states. This is a big change, and so more than ever, you have new people that are voting, and a lot of them are Andrew Jackson supporters. That's why, again, he's known as the first president of the common man. These supporters are Jacksonians. They are passionate. They are die-hard. It's almost like a cult, okay? It's very much like a cult around Andrew Jackson. So I would say, I would get the appeal of Andrew Jackson, especially after what went down in 1824 with the corrupt bargain with Henry Clay working behind the scenes because he was thinking that maybe he's going to help him later on. I would be definitely upset with Henry Clay and not want him to be president, but he wasn't running in 1828. It was John Q. Adams again. Now he has the because by the way, 1824 I didn't want Calhoun. I don't like John Calhoun. But in 1828, it's Richard Rush who is his running mate. And so I would be more on board with Richard Rush much more than John Calhoun. Martin Rios, hey, thoughts on Al Gore? Why he never ran again unlike the other? I'll hold off on answering that until the end here. Yeah. Come back and remind me on Al Gore. But yeah, so 1828, we have a rematch, but this time it's just these two, and the country is pretty much split on. Not looking good for John Quincy Adams, and yeah, he did not win it. I would have voted for John Quincy Adams and Richard Rush and been disappointed. But at the same time, not necessarily that scared of Andrew Jackson. I think that change, maybe like at that time, probably was needed in that direction. And I would have just been like, okay, he's a rotten person, owns slaves, very horrible against Native Americans, but we'll see if he can push the country overall in a better direction. All right, so and you in the chat, it looks like most of you were voting for it looks like Andrew Jackson in 1828. Although I do see a few John Quincy Adams. Malcolm Lee Kennedy, thanks for the, wow, thank you for that donation. It really hit me that you have a video describing how you would vote in an 1824 election. I realized I wouldn't have been able to vote. Perspective, love your videos. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's still just white men at this point that can vote. Not women, not people of color. It's still a very small percentage of the population. That's why if you go to the end of this video, I always say the percentage of the population that voted, that is actually of the eligible population. Of the eligible. And that number goes way down because, you remember in the earlier elections, it's like 90% or something really high. Because a lot of, I don't know. It's when you expand who's able to vote, you're going to have a lower percentage of people who actually vote. Okay. Let's go on to the election of 1832. Jackson now has been in office for 4 years. We got another four-way race, but these third-party candidates are a bit different. Like, in fact, this was the first election where we had true third-party candidates that actually made it a true race like this. So Henry Clay's back. Henry Clay's like, okay, I'm going to give it another shot. I really want to see Andrew Jackson go down. And he is campaigning hard. Like, I mean, they didn't really campaign that hard back then. Usually they let the supporters do all the work. But Henry Clay's actually, dare I say, giving speeches. Giving speeches. The nerve of that dude. Okay? I am looking at Andrew Jackson. I'm still like a little bit upset by his character. And a bit reckless with the central bank, just wanting to destroy the central bank when I can kind of see when you destroy the central bank, you're going to have problems. You're going to have instability. And sure enough, that's what happened after, he left office and Martin Van Buren had to deal with that. Oh, the irony. And then the Indian Removal Act. Dude. What the heck are you doing, Jackson? The Indian Removal Act. When was that passed? Wait, was that the second term? I think that was the second term. No, I was right. It was the third term, 1830. 1830. So, dude, big no-no. I'm not voting for Andrew Jackson. But then you look at Henry Clay. It looks like most of you in the chat are all about Henry Clay. A lot of Never Jackson folks. That's basically who Henry Clay's supporters were. They were mostly just voting against Jackson. I might be talked into Henry Clay, but I think because of the opportunity of this being a third-party shot, I would might be to take a chance on William Wirt and his running mate, Amos Elmaker. I think I would be swayed into this. John Floyd, no, because he wasn't even that, John Floyd wasn't even necessarily, a lot of people supported him, but he was not interested in being it. He's like, no. William Wirt was kind of it's a little known name in history. The biggest appeal for him is that he was an anti-Freemason guy. Just simply put, he was an anti-elite dude, okay? He was the anti-Masonic party. That was like the fact that he wanted to rise up against the elites was the biggest appeal. I don't know much about every little policy issue that he had, but to me, this would have been an election where I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna stick it to the establishment. That's what I'd have done. Okay, so not John Floyd, but William Wirt and Amos Elmaker. That's him, by the way. Look at him. I always say he was the first hipster in American history that people don't know about. Anyway, back to 1832. Looks like most of you guys say Henry Clay. You know, more power to you. Before I go to 1836, I want to make sure I get these super chats. Wilson Ramon, thank you. Love your videos. I have such respect for all your teachers, and I'm going to go to college to be a social studies teacher one day. Keep it up, Mr. B. Thank you so much. Good luck to you, and thank you for joining us in this profession. It's a very wonderful, fun profession. Josiah White, you should check out Monsieur Z's video about the Jackson era of American history. Interesting to hear his perspective of the Indian Act. I will definitely do that. I've caught a couple of his videos before. He's been in the chat before, and we've gone back and forth a little bit. So yeah, I will do that. Thanks for the suggestion. Mr. Man Person Guy, thank you. What president do you think would have gotten a third term pre-Truman? Of course, if they ran after their second term, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, maybe James Madison, Andrew Jackson. That's mainly it. And then also, I think I've caught up. Thank you, Mr. Man Person Guy. Okay. Back to this. So we're going to now the election of 1836. This was a weird one. This is the one where the Whig Party has now been established, and again, they're still the anti-Jackson Party, but now they're just anti-Democrats because that's the party that was founded around Andrew Jackson. And they're like, maybe let's try the regionalism strategy, which means we're going to go off the assumption that a lot of voters will vote for their favorite son, which is a term meaning that voters are more likely to vote for whoever the candidate is who is from their home state or home region. And so they're like, if we do this, we'll split up all the electoral votes so there's not a clear majority in the Electoral College. And so without a clear majority, then Congress, the House of Representatives will get to decide. And so the Whigs have that, we have it. And so we will vote one of our Whigs in. This strategy completely failed. Martin Van Buren would win. Who would I vote for? Martin Van Buren, not necessarily. I mean, I think he was better than Andrew Jackson, like personally by far. But still, we have a horrible depression, economic depression, and the Democratic Party is responsible for it. All right. So I'm looking at change. Like a lot of Americans primarily vote, like most voters everywhere in the world, they vote with their wallets. However the economy is doing. If the economy is getting worse, you vote for the opponent. You don't vote for the incumbent party or the incumbent. That's what I would have done. So I'm going to vote for one of the Whigs. Of these Whigs, I like the most Daniel Webster. Right there. I'm going to pause it right here so you can. The guy on the left there, Daniel Webster, the respected senator who basically was one of the leaders in Congress for many years. As his running mate, I would have voted for Francis Granger. That's who the Whigs actually chose with them. Francis Granger, I don't think is on here. Let's see here. Is that him? Yeah, wait. Francis Granger. Oh, that's that dude. There's actually a photograph of him. Yeah. So that's who I would have gone with for 1836. Daniel Webster and Francis Granger. All right. Let's check out the super chats here. I think I missed a couple. Dang it, I missed them. How do I go back on this? Try to hold them off to the end because I keep missing them here anyway. Oh, I'm sorry if I missed it. Sometimes this happens. Anyway, back to this. We're moving along here. I can't believe this is actually taking longer than I thought. Yeah, it looks like most of you are saying Webster. Okay, I see Tippecanoe. That would be William Henry Harrison. What any supporters of the other candidates here? We got remember the election of 1836. We have. Let's just go to the Wikipedia. That's fine. So, any Magnum fans in here? Just because of his name. Any Magnum fans in here? He was the North Carolina, I believe, congressman. We have Hugh White from Tennessee. Any Hugh White fans in here? All right. Looks like most of you want William Henry Harrison or Daniel Webster. It's still too early. So any for sure. And I'm not even going to bring up recent elections because of the, well, many reasons. Mainly because it's, I feel like it's still too soon for especially 2020 and 2016. And I don't want half my audience to hate me. So that's another reason. Okay. So back to history here. We're going to 1840. 1840 now, we have Martin Van Buren had a pretty rough term as president. He is going up for re-election against a now more popular than ever William Henry Harrison, who made a name for himself out in Indiana. The Battle of Tippecanoe, that's why he got that nickname. And then his campaign, Tippecanoe and Tyler too. John Tyler is his running mate, and I would have voted for them. I would have voted for William Henry Harrison and John Tyler. The economy was continuing to be meh. I kind of was leaning towards the Whigs, honestly, for a lot of these elections. The Whig Party was appealing to me. They seemed to have more progressive ideas to move the country in a better direction. So who do you think? Lots of Tippecanoe and Tyler 2 comments. Now, we all know what happened to William Henry Harrison. He did win, but was only around for 30 days after his inauguration. So, who knows? He could have ended up being the best president we ever had. I mean, I doubt it, but you never know. He was certainly a good leader, very decisive. I don't know. He was really bad with his money, apparently. All right, so now we're moving on to 1844. We have a dark horse candidate. Comes out of nowhere, and that'd be James Polk. James Polk was another Democrat, a protege, if you could call it that, of Andrew Jackson. Was a early supporter of Andrew Jackson, an early Jacksonian, and shared many of the same beliefs, values, wanted expansion, wanted to expand the power of the executive branch, reduce that tariff. He got his way. James Polk, he got his way. Yeah, so he would be a very appealing candidate, especially when you look at his opponent, which is Henry Clay, a guy who's been around now and kind of frankly boring by this point. Like, we kind of all know what we're getting. The thing about Henry Clay, though, that was more appealing by this time is by this time he was known as the Great Compromiser, as a guy who consistently worked across the aisle to get really important legislation passed and really keep the country together, along with Webster, when it was slowly drifting apart over the issue of the expansion of slavery out west. So I think Henry Clay is appealing for that reason. This is another election where I'd be torn. I would kind of be like, okay, flipping a coin almost. I just don't know. I guess the only thing that really would have me really concerned if I was alive in 1844 would be the fact that James Polk was a little too aggressive with his rhetoric. This seems like a guy, even by his speeches, like even before becoming president, you could tell this guy was probably going to get us into a war, whether it be Britain again over Oregon or Mexico. And sure enough, that's what happened. I'm telling you, you could have seen this happen before he was elected because of his rhetoric. A lot of presidents have that type of rhetoric, or the candidates have that rhetoric, and they end up not following through with it. But Polk would have scared me a little bit, and I would not have been a fan of going to war with Mexico. And so I would have, because of that, went ahead and voted for our boy, Henry Clay. Henry Clay's running mate in 1844 was Thomas Frelinghuysen. Let's get a picture of him up there. Thomas Frelinghuysen. Did I say Thomas? Theodore Frelinghuysen is what I meant to say. Look at that guy. I don't know much about him, honestly, but that he was running with Henry Clay that time. A Whig. So yeah, I would have gone with, oh, there he is again. So Henry Clay, just out of the lesser of two evils type of deal. Who do you all say? Looks like a lot of you are Polk fans, actually. We know that he ended up being one of the most consequential presidents, if not the most, in American history in terms of just what he got done in those 4 years, for better or for worse. I mean, I think obviously the United States was better off because of Polk, but at what cost? And if you want to have the moral high ground, I think that Polk was somebody that we should look at more critically in terms of, you know, Lebensraum of basically North America, if you want to put it in extreme terms, you know, with Native Americans, just bullying the Mexicans, you know, wanting to basically just take land at all costs. I think today that's not something that most Americans would be morally comfortable with, but let's be honest, we all benefited today from it, didn't we? You know, it's easy for us to say that today. Me living in 1844, I can kind of see the appeal of Polk. I mean, I want us to be the top dog. Maybe we need to do some bad things in order to be the top dog. If we truly believed in our values over, you know, that's the whole manifest destiny idea. So anyway, I'm rambling on this one. I just think it would be a tough election. Okay. 1848. We have a three-way race here. It's an interesting one. So we are, this is another one, though it's a little difficult for me. I think that it helps again that I have three choices, but Martin Van Buren's back. And this time he's actually with the Free Soil Party, a new political party that was founded on the idea that, and I have a video about the Free Soil Party if you're interested, but the Free Soil Party was primarily founded on, like, let's stop the expansion of slavery out west, which is kind of funny because Martin Van Buren was such a big supporter of Jackson. And he was a big reason why he got elected. He started the Democratic Party, and then now he's like, yeah, I don't like slavery, though. And here Andrew Jackson owned 300 slaves. So, or maybe it was like, no, that was Jefferson. Jackson had a lot of slaves. So anyway, Van Buren is appealing. And it's like, okay, this guy's all right. Zachary Taylor is a war hero. Zachary Taylor is a Whig. He could have been a Democrat easily. I think he was talked into being a Whig by the Whig Party. Good for them. He is well liked by the military, well liked by most Americans because of his bravery and not bravery as much as just intelligence in the Mexican-American War. Oh yeah, there's William Butler as well. And then there's Lewis Cass. Lewis Cass, of course, his appeal is experience. He's the Michigan senator who really was influential in getting big legislation passed. And so, you know, he's appealing as well. I would have gone with the Free Soil Party. I would have gone third party. I would have voted for Martin Van Buren and his running mate, Charles Francis Adams. There he is, perfect timing, who was grandson of John Adams, son of John Quincy Adams. Forward-thinking abolitionist. So, who would you all go for? It looks like a lot of Taylor supporters. Insert alias here, formerly known as Woodrow Wilson. I love your username. Thanks for the super chat. And he says, or she says, Lewis Cass, or they say, Lewis Cass was a beautiful man. Yeah, Lewis Cass was not a beautiful man, especially in his early years. You can see that pretty... There he is. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, well. He was a good... This is the, you know, looks didn't matter as much back then. If he ran today, no chance at all. Sorry, Lewis. There's Alec Baldwin. Actually, Millard Fillmore. That's what he looked like. So, yeah, it looks like most of you are Zachary Taylor in 1848. Demigod, what do you think about doing a Connecticut versus New Jersey? I hate to say this, but I'm more likely to do. I'm planning on doing Connecticut versus Massachusetts. So sorry about that. But yeah, most of you say Taylor. So you would all. I guess you think that I'm just wasting my vote, huh? Voting third party for this Free Soil Party, and I get why you say that. I totally get it. We're almost to the time when Kansas exists, so that's coming up. And once that's the case, that's really going to sway some of my votes. So keep that in mind. We're now up to the election of 1852. Another three-way race because the Free Soil Party is still pretty, you know, they're getting some funding. They're staying pretty relevant. Helmer, thank you. Rusty Shackelford from Mod. Also, Robert Jr. Yang, 1848. All right, all right. Thanks for your. Oh yeah, 1844 Part Two. In many ways, this election was like that. So 1852. If you've watched any of my videos about senators, I have a favorite senator video, and John Hale makes that list. John Hale was one of my favorite senators in American history, and he was a guy who was not afraid to just tell it as it is, even though he knew that he would really be making a lot of people mad. Uh, so, especially on the slavery issue, he did not apologize. He did not compromise like Henry Clay. There he is, or others. He was more of a, I guess he's like the precursor to the radical Republicans. And then we have Winfield Scott, another war hero of the Mexican-American War. And the Whigs now have convinced another war hero to run. They're like, hey, we got Zachary Taylor elected. Sorry that didn't work out, by the way. He died. Millard Fillmore took his place, but Fillmore was out now. So, and then we got Franklin Pierce. The Democratic Party is going with this young guy who is not necessarily known for getting laws passed or anything, but he's likable, and yeah, why not give this exciting, fresh new perspective in there? So I would have gone with John Hale, as you probably are not surprised to hear by this point, and George Washington Julian was his running mate. Let's look at him, George Washington. Not that George Washington. No relation. Yeah, a lot of people don't know about this guy. A leading opponent of slavery. Yeah, he wore bow ties. Not messing around there. So yeah, that's who I would have voted for. Again, like that third party vote. You're wasting your vote. Who would you vote for in the election of 1852? Got a lot of Hale supporters in there. Hale, yeah. All right, what about, okay, so a few people are supporting Scott. Nobody for Franklin Pierce? Oh, the tragic life of a doughface. Oh, man. And it's pretty split between Scott and Hale. No Franklin Pierce. All right. Yeah, I mean, Winfield Scott, he probably would have been all right. He would have been all right. Let's go ahead and go to 1856. 1856, we have another three-way race. These are becoming quite common in the mid-1800s. And Millard Fillmore is back, which is a weird one. People don't realize, like, okay, this is the American Party that's nominating him, the Know Nothing Party, as they're also known. They embrace that, even though it was originally meant to make fun of them. And they are the Nativist Party, America First Party, basically, of its time. Millard Fillmore was not a Nativist guy, but he was still a popular politician, and they just pretty much nominated him whether he wanted it or not. He wasn't even around for the convention. They're like, oh, you're nominating me? Okay, I guess I'll go with it. So, yeah, Millard Fillmore, I think, gets too much negative things about him because of the association with the Know Nothing Party. Then on the Democratic side, we have James Buchanan. We now know him to be the worst president in American history, pretty much. But in 1856, we didn't know that. He was just another senator, So who knows? Now, it wasn't going well with Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce, it was so bad that he didn't run for re-election after winning in 1852. Franklin Pierce, most famously signed one of the worst laws in American history, which was the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And so, yeah, increasingly the issue is slavery, and more people just like, you know what, the heck with it. We are going to go all out against slavery at all costs. And so here comes in the Republican Party. The first Republican Party candidate was John Fremont. And what a first choice that was. I'm seeing in the comments already a lot of you want Fremont. And I would have too. John Fremont was my guy. His running mate, William L. Dayton. Fremont is this exciting, like, world's most interesting man type character who was an explorer before he got into politics out in California. He's like making a name for himself. he's just he is a truly exciting person. Um, for some reason, though, the Democratic Party still has the momentum, and it's mostly because of that slave power in the South kind of really have an influence. And so Buchanan wins. This is always like a surprise when you really kind of look at the times, 1856, like, and a lot of people, of course, blame Millard Fillmore. Oh, you stole votes that would have gone to Fremont. Well, but remember, the Republican Party was brand new, starting out, still just trying to figure out how to campaign, and how do you win over any southern state? I mean, how do you win over Kentucky or Maryland or Delaware even? I mean, come on. So there's Fremont. He does not win, but I would have voted for him. Oh yeah, his running mate William L. Dayton. This is what he looked like. In case we, all these obscure names that we forget that they were running mates. They could have been president so easily. He was a Whig Party guy, former what was it? No, senator, New Jersey, minister to France in the later on. That was under the Lincoln administration. Anyway, okay, so let's go back now to the most important election in American history, the election of 1860. For real, this is the only election that resulted in a freaking war. The American Civil War happens as a direct consequence of this election. It's a four-way race. It's it's regionalism entirely. And it's a crazy one. So me, if I was alive in 1860, I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, I'm strongly against slavery. I'm looking at but at the same time, I want to keep the Union together. I'm really worried about the future of our country staying together. I've seen the last 10 years us drifting further and further apart. I'm seeing what's going on. Now let's say now I live in Kansas, and Kansas is about to become a state. So let's say I'm now living in Kansas from here on out. I'm in Kansas because I want slavery to end. Okay, first and foremost. Who's going to be the guy who gets that done? Let's see. Who are you saying in the chat? I mean, I saw somebody say Bell. Are you kidding me? Oh, Breckinridge. Lincoln or Douglas? Okay, Lincoln. Most of you are saying Lincoln. Okay. Oh, trick lessons where Fremont, California comes from. Yep, that's right. Thanks for the donation there, trick lessons. Okay. Well, it's looking like most of you are saying Abraham Lincoln. And dadgummit, you're right. Abraham Lincoln is the guy. You got to remember, Abraham Lincoln, he's not just coming out and saying, he's saying, I'm against slavery. But I'm not, for ending it for everywhere. I think it should end as we expand further west, like the Free Soil Party has been saying, or like they used to say. And the Whigs used to say. Lincoln used to be a Whig. I'm going with Abraham Lincoln. I want slavery to end, but let's be pragmatic here. Let's keep the Union together because we have a lot of crazy people in the South who want to keep slavery around, okay? Hannibal Hamlin is his running mate. Hannibal Hamlin is a terrific running mate. And then Stephen Douglas is appealing as well. I get his pragmatism. I get his experience is great. But Douglas still, I have a bias against Douglas because of him being the main author of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which is why my home soon-to-be state is, having to deal with violence. People getting murdered over the slavery issue. So, Stephen Douglas, I'm sorry. I get your appeal, but it's not going to work. You're trying to be this moderate guy to keep the country together. I'm going with Lincoln. John Breckinridge and John Bell. They're Southerners. They're pro-slavery. No thanks. It's time to move on. The country is ready to. I see some folks saying that they're actually Bell fans, though. Now, why do you like Bell? I'm wondering why. Somebody who said Bell. Why do you like Bell? White Tyler Perry. Hey, that's your birthday. Yeah, November 6th. That's my birthday. I would have voted on my birthday. Okay. I don't know. I'm not seeing the appeal of Bell. I mean, Breckinridge at least was this charismatic dude who was exciting, had populist rhetoric. I just don't see John Bell's. I guess John Bell's like, okay, I like slavery, but I'm going to do whatever I can to keep the country together. I get that appeal maybe, but come on. Naod Solomon, how much does partisan lean affect choices? It affects it a lot. It really does. All right, we're going to move on to 1864. 1864, it just seems like an eternity between 1860 and 1864. And even just looking at pictures of Abraham Lincoln, it seems like he's aged like 20 years in 4 years. Abraham Lincoln, I thought, had done an overall pretty good job leading the Union, leading the United States, what remained of it. It was a bit reckless in the beginning how the war even started, how the fact that they even went to war to begin with, but okay, that's in the past. Let's look at 1864. The war's been going on for 3.5 years, and at this point, I would have been like, we need to just finish this, and it's going pretty well by 1864. By election day 1864, it is going pretty well. The Battle of Gettysburg and the Siege of Vicksburg, there you go on the screen. That had happened the previous year. The war had turned in the favor of the North. We were closing in on them. At this point in the war, the Southerners, the Confederacy, were so desperate. They were running out of soldiers. They were having young kids fight on their side, or old men fight on their side. Abraham Lincoln is now talking about ending slavery, amending the Constitution, ending slavery. He had already signed the Emancipation Proclamation, so go that. I get that Lincoln has done bad things as far as like put people, whistleblowers, in prison and suspend habeas corpus. Okay, yeah, this is a war. We are at war, okay? The worst war in American history that we've, as far as total casualties. We need to end this war, but we need to end it decisively and like making sure that this is not fought in vain, as Lincoln said at Gettysburg. We're ending it it says now a war of ideals to end slavery, to free every African American by the end of this war is free. George McClellan wanted to keep fighting the war, but he was more about, okay, the way we're doing it is bad. Okay, McClellan, you are a horrible general. Okay, I'm going with Lincoln for re-election. And this time Andrew Johnson is his running mate. I don't even care. I don't like Johnson. But at least this is showing that Lincoln is willing to compromise and say, hey, I'm going to work with this Democrat, and we're going to form a new party that's all about, trying to... those of us who are with the country still, we all need to be on the same page. And so those Democrats that stayed with the United States during the Civil War, you need to know that we're all in this together. All right? So anyway... Lincoln for the re-election 1864. Who would you go with? Let me know in the chat. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have already written Lincoln. Ew, Johnson. I know. But this is also before we knew what would happen with Andrew Johnson. He didn't have quite that reputation already because he wasn't in office yet. All right, so now we are up to, thankfully, the American Civil War is over. It's 1868. And tragically, Lincoln has been assassinated by this point. We have Andrew Johnson, who's one of the worst presidents in American history. He doesn't even bother with trying to run for re-election. And instead, the Democratic Party that remains scrounges up, like, okay, let's try to get this Horatio Seymour guy who doesn't want to run. Let's get him in there. All right. 007 Robot Chicken, hey, thanks for the donation. Wow, can't stay for the stream, but I wanted just to thank you for all your videos over the years. They've made me realize how interesting U.S. history is, and I appreciate it. Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. All right, I know this has taken a while. We've already been over an hour. So anyway, Johnson's not there. He's the first president impeached. Now we are looking at Horatio Seymour. He's somewhat appealing, as a guy who doesn't really want to do it, but he's kind of thrown into it. But then we have the war hero, Ulysses Grant. Ulysses Grant is definitely an appealing guy in 1868. He was a big reason why the Union won the Civil War. Great leadership, great story. He had been through some ups and downs in his life, so his character is strong. He's running with... Schuyler Colfax, a radical Republican who was a leading force trying to end slavery, and it's looking like Grant's going to keep pushing it. Grant's talking about not only like, I'm fully supportive of the 14th Amendment and full civil rights for African Americans. I would like for African American men to be able to vote, and so I'm going with Grant. I'm going with Grant and Schuyler Colfax in 1868. Sorry, Horatio. Sorry. Who would you vote for in 1868? Looking like a lot of you are voting for Grant as well. Yep. He's underrated as a president, too. I think he gets a lot of crap. I'm starting to lose my voice. Crap. Okay. Speaking of... Okay, there's Schuyler Colfax. Then his beard. Oh, the bearded age is in full swing by 1868. Thanks for starting that up, Lincoln. Okay, so 1872. Grant's been in office. He does get elected. He's been around now 4 years, and it's not going as well. A lot of corruption in his cabinet. He's kind of like a guy who's a little bit too hesitant sometimes to, do what's right, trying to appeal to Southerners. Not quite as aggressive with Reconstruction policies yet. He does become more aggressive later in his presidency. But then the interesting thing about 1872 is you got some awesome opponents to Ulysses Grant. You have some third parties that are interesting that I'll get to here in a minute, but you also have Horace Greeley. Horace Greeley, the editor of the New York Tribune, his stuff is read by millions. He calls himself a socialist. He reads Marx. He believes in ghosts, and he also considers himself a spiritualist. A very fascinating guy, Horace Greeley. But I would say I would lean actually towards Horace Greeley at this point, because I'm just like, Grant, you're just not cutting it. But almost like being in Kansas, let me jump ahead to the map here. Hendricks is running now with so Kansas. Oh, whoop, come on now. Kansas is leaning heavily Republican. This has been the case since it became a state, because that's a big reason why it became a state. So it's looking like Grant is going to be the easy winner in Kansas. Remember, it's winner takes all with the Electoral College. So I'm just going to have a protest vote. This is going to be my first election living in Kansas in 1872. I'm just going to vote for this wacky new this candidate called Victoria Woodhull, the first female candidate for president in American history, who's running with Frederick Douglass. Why not? I'm going to write them in if I have to, if they don't show up on the ballot. You know what? As a protest vote, because I'm not really that excited about Ulysses Grant or Horace Greeley. Who would you vote for in 1872? Looks like a lot of you are still sticking with Grant. Yeah. It wasn't like he was that bad. Grant did win. Horace Greeley, remember, this is the one where Horace Greeley died a few weeks after the election. He still ended up getting a lot of electoral votes anyway. But kind of a crazy situation. But it looks like most of you said Grant. Oh, I did. There we go. Sayer QT says Woodhull as a protest vote. All right. Yeah, so I voted for a woman for president in 1872, for the record. Cowboy, Battle of Palo Duro Canyon was a knock on Grant. Okay, I don't know much about that. All right, we're going on to 1876, another very interesting election in American history. This is one of the closest elections in American history. We're talking one that was highly contested because, well, again, we have somebody who gets more votes total, Samuel Tilden, than the guy who actually ended up winning in the Electoral College, Rutherford Hayes. So, somebody's really passionate about Greeley. Greeley all the way enthusiasm. Insert alias here, formerly known as Woodrow Wilson. All right, but 1876, by this time we have become divided again. The Republican Party had lost a lot of its influence, and the split was north-south pretty solidly again by this point. Remember that a lot of Southerners had lost that right to vote, after the Civil War, but now by 1876, they're all back. And so I'm not that excited about Rutherford Hayes, just like I wasn't that excited about Grant in 1872. And I'm kind of looking for a change at this point, just to kind of shake things up. Samuel Tilden is appealing. He has some really, reforms that seem like they can make a big difference in terms of especially economic reforms. He's what's known as a Bourbon Democrat, a guy who is wanting free trade. I'm a big free trade guy, low tariffs. He's similar to Grover Cleveland later on, Samuel Tilden is. Governor of New York, lots of experience as governor of New York, did well there. And very popular in the Northeast. There it is, Bourbon Democrat. So I would actually, I'm kind of torn on this one, but I would lean towards Samuel Tilden and his running mate, Thomas Hendricks. There's Thomas Hendricks, who was also a governor, and kind of a solid team there of Tilden and Hendricks together. Lots of executive experience. So yeah, that's who I'd go for. It looks like a lot of you are actually going. This is surprising. A lot of Tilden fans in the comments here. I would have been outraged after the result of this one, like saying, "In the Electoral College." Oh, there's Peter Cooper. Yeah, he's the like the oldest candidate ever. Look at that beard. Yep. All right. So it looks like most of you are saying Tilden. I vote Hayes, but free trade is very appealing. Yep. But still, most of you are Tilden, some Hayes. I'm going Greenback. There we go. Get some Green Party action in there. By the way, check out the Greenback Party video by Emperor Tiger Star. It's really good. What were considered swing states back then? In 1876, I believe that, I don't know, honestly. Let's look at this map. If you look just at the map, it's looking like maybe Louisiana might even be a swing state. Pennsylvania, yep. Ohio, probably. Maybe Florida. South Carolina. That's interesting to see the sprinkles there of Hayes support in the South. That's always interesting to me. I am going to make a video eventually. I've decided about like looking at the swing states for every single presidential election, because that's a cool thing to look at. Just know that Pennsylvania and Ohio, those two states are almost always swing states throughout American history. Yeah, but lots of fraud going on, man. Tilden was screwed, okay? All right, 1880. Now we're up to James Garfield. Boy, what could have been if he were to live and if those doctors did not mishandle him after getting shot by the crazy person. Yeah, James Garfield, we don't know how good a president he would have been, but a very intelligent man. Rutherford is, he's like, I'm out of here. Now, by this time, the South has established or started to establish Jim Crow laws. Reconstruction had ended after the last election. James Garfield is somebody who would be willing to, maybe use the federal government if needed to stop these Jim Crow laws. Like, he was actually pretty ahead of his time, very anti-corruption, like, against the political machines, this patronage system. William Scott Hancock, not very that impressive. So I would definitely go James Garfield and his running mate Chester Arthur. What about you all? Oh yeah, lots of Garfield support in here. Lasagna Cat. Yeah, James Garfield, similar to William Henry Harrison, I always think about what could have been with him. It seemed like he was a man of integrity, similar to Grover Cleveland, but also the intelligence, and he was charismatic as well. Remember, he was a preacher before he was a politician. Pixie Dust 411, thank you for your videos and hard work. Well, thank you for your support. All right, moving on to 1884. Oh, and James Garfield does win that election. But, of course, less than a year later, he's out of there. Chester Arthur takes over. But Arthur's out of the picture. And so now we have Grover Cleveland for the Democrats and James Blaine for the Republicans. James Blaine had been one of those guys always floating around as a possible candidate, and it's now finally happened. If he wasn't a candidate, he'd be the vice presidential candidate. So he's he's hoping that the Republican Party can stay in power, even though they've been losing some of that momentum in the 1880s. And it's mostly because of the economy. The economy is, remember, this is in the middle of the Great Depression. At least that's what they called it back then. It's actually, we call it today the Long Depression. So a lot of people struggling, and they're beginning to talk about like major reforms, like maybe the system is rigged against us. So who would you go for in this one? Daniel Diaz, yeah, thank you. Write in Frederick Douglass for president. All right, okay, you could always do that. We are pretty split on this one, ladies and gentlemen and folks. This is, whoa, we got Blaine Gang, we got Cleveland supporters like, oh, it's, whoa. Of all the elections so far, this is by far the most divided. I've seen it in the chat. So we're pretty split, almost 50-50 between Grover Cleveland fans and James Blaine fans. Wow, interesting. Well, I would have had a hard time as well, although James Blaine just wasn't that exciting to me. But I think that you all know that I'm a fan of Grover Cleveland. So yeah, Grover Cleveland and his running mate Thomas Hendricks, who's back. Remember, he ran with before he ran with Samuel Tilden. So yeah, I would remember that election of 1876, and I'm like, Grover Cleveland this time. I remember how we got screwed over back then, and I would have went with the Democrat. Grover Cleveland had integrity. He was a great leader. He was somebody who was pragmatic, worked across the aisle. Of course, a Democrat, but at the same time, personally, was probably ahead of most politicians in terms of African American rights. He's still way behind by today's standards, but you know what I'm saying. And he would be a decent president. I think he's underrated still by many historians as far as how he did in his presidency. So yeah, looks like half of you are upset with me for choosing Cleveland in 1884. Now we're going to go on to 1888. Things are getting even worse. The populist movement is starting to, well, they don't call it populism yet, but that's what's the precursor is happening. We have unions. We have just a bunch of, you can tell, changes on the corner, around the corner. And then we have Benjamin Harrison, who's the Republican candidate, who is just, okay. Republicans, can you do any better than that for me? I just feel like he's just another kind of meh candidate. Didn't do anything really that special in Indiana politics. He's the grandson of William Henry Harrison, but without the charm of William Henry Harrison and the military heroism of William Henry Harrison. Grover Cleveland, I'm sticking with him because I liked his integrity mostly. So 1888, I'm going with Grover Cleveland, and now because Thomas Hendricks has died, it's Alan Thurman. Let's get a picture of Alan Thurman Alan Thurman, obscure Alan G. Thurman, Ohio politician, senator. They lost. Cleveland lost. Harrison actually won that election. It was fairly close. But yeah, who would you go for in 1888? It's kind of one of those elections like it's another lesser of two evils for many Americans. Still Cleveland, a lot more. Okay, so it seems like less people are in the chat are supporters of Harrison than they were of James Blaine. So that is interesting. Okay. All right. So yeah, but he won. Look at that. Yeah. At least he had a good beard. Oh, and John Sherman. Forgot about John Sherman. Okay. So let's go on to 1892 is one of my favorite elections to look at. I don't bring it up enough, but 1892, the populist movement is now in full swing. We have organized movements. We have a populist party. James Weaver is their candidate. Before we get to it, looks like I gotta insert alias here, formerly known as Woodrow Wilson, says there was an actual Old West shootout in the 1888 election between Harrison supporters and Cleveland supporters. I never knew that. I'm going to have to research that. That's amazing. Holy crap. Halloween Villages says, how much has your opinion changed on the president since your presidential tier list? Surprisingly, quite a bit. Surprisingly, quite a bit. I'm going to have to do an updated version of that. I don't know when yet, but I will update that. So 1892, we have a three-way race. James Weaver is the Populist Party's pick, and pretty much if you are in Kansas, like where I am from, I'm living out in Kansas presumably, in 1892, if I was alive, I would be all on board with him now. But look at the competition. Look who's back. We got Grover Cleveland trying to be the first president ever to have two terms, but non-consecutive. And I really did like Cleveland. However, the last 4 years have been horrible for me and my family because the economy still sucks. So I know I'm not voting for Benjamin Harrison. I didn't like him the first time around. And the last 4 years has not gone good. Plus, what he's been doing foreign policy-wise with Hawaii especially, that's messed up. Cleveland, I might be willing to go that way, but ultimately I'm really intrigued by James Weaver and his running mate James Field. So James Weaver, if you don't know much about him, he was in Congress. He was in the House of Representatives for Iowa, so that's a state not too far away from Kansas. Definitely the Greenbackers were all about him in 1880, and he'd been around. The People's Party or Populist Party, had their eyes on him well before the election of 1892. So the other guy, his running mate, I don't know much about, honestly, James Field. Oh, there's lots of James Fields. One of them is a criminal, apparently. Oh, Charlottesville. Interesting. Okay. He would have been the James G. Field. There he is. Who was Attorney General of Virginia. That's right. He ran with him. Anyway, I'm going with James Weaver, the Populist Party, because it's time. We need to rise up against the monopolies and the special interests in Washington. All right. Who would you go with? I'm very curious in the chat who you go with. Jack's Productions, thank you. You say Harrison was my uncle via marriage. Interesting. All right. Looking in the chat, it looks like most of you are with me with Weaver, but some of you are still excited about the return of Cleveland. Disappointed in Harrison at this point. Yep. It's between Weaver and Cleveland. It looks like more Weaver. Oh, a random Kanye West again. That's always good to see Kanye. Kanye West was not alive in 1892. So, all right. Looks like Weaver will win in the chat as well. All right. 1896. Now the populist movement is bigger than ever. In fact, so much the Democratic Party has co-opted it. And their guy is William Jennings Bryan, who is the quintessential populist candidate. And he ran for president many times. This is the very first time that he ran. He was a young man. In his 30s, the youngest major political party candidate ever. And then the guy that was opponent was he was more of an establishment guy, but also a man of integrity, a very religious man. People could... he was trustworthy, and that would be William McKinley. He was especially trustworthy with the business interests. And the thing about 1896 is that it seemed like the economy was about to be on the upswing. Everybody could feel like, okay, things are getting better here. But the populist rhetoric of William Jennings Bryan, just such an inspiring guy talking about free silver. Yeah, inflation for the farmers. You will make a profit again, farmers. Who are you having in the chat? Who you want to win in the chat? I think I already know who you're all going to vote for. Yep. Most of you are William Jennings Bryan. Most of you, well, all of you say William because it's about all the Williams. Okay, more McKinley supporters than I originally anticipated. Yeah, I would go with William Jennings Bryan. I mean, he's from Nebraska as well. Keep in mind, I'm voting from Kansas, that favorite son aspect of it. William Jennings Bryan running mate was Adlai Stevenson, another great politician with great leadership ability. I think I missed a super chat. Sorry if I missed it. So yeah, this would be oh, McKinley resembles an owl. That's what very Charlie Wallace also says, greetings, fellow Kansan. I used to live in Leavenworth. Wonderful. Yeah, I'm not that far away from there. So yeah, I'm going to be for the Nebraska boy, William Jennings Bryan, the populist who wants to stick it to the special interests in Washington and the big railroad companies and the monopolies and all the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, whatever you say, however you want to pronounce it. Okay, so let's go on to McKinley wins. We all know William McKinley wins, and the economy actually does really well, especially for the 1%, but that trickles down actually. It kind of does. Everybody gets the pie is bigger, so everybody gets a slightly bigger piece of the pie. So in 1900, things are going much better economically for most Americans. Plus, by this point, we are becoming a world power. The Spanish-American War had been a decisive, pretty easy victory for the Americans. Now we have all these colonial possessions. If that's your sort of thing, me living in 1900, that would not be my sort of thing. I would be an anti-imperialist, like Mark Twain, like William Jennings Bryan. I would be somebody saying, look at that map right there. See, I would be like, no, we need to stop trying to take over the world like these European countries. That's not right. So I would have been against McKinley mostly based on foreign policy. And so therefore, I'm going to... William Jennings Bryan is more the anti-imperialist, again with the populist rhetoric, again running with... Oh, he didn't run with Adlai Stevenson in 1896. He ran with him in 1900. I'm sorry. It was Arthur Sewall that he ran with in 1896, apparently. But yeah, I would go with William Jennings Bryan again. Who would you go for in 1900? I mean, I know the economy's doing better. I get it. I get it. But I'm just saying, the Spanish-American War, especially what's going on with the Philippines, they're putting people in concentration camps. Of course, I wouldn't have known that as an average voter in 1900. I would have known what was really happening overseas because the press didn't cover it very well. Most of the press was yellow press, the yellow journalism of the time. So I guess I'm a little bit hindsight 2020 here, but I just think I would have been so anti-imperialist and so against going into the Spanish-American War to begin with that's why I would have been turned off by McKinley. And McKinley was one of those guys, kind of, to me, was like he used his religion as like, like I'm just going to, I know what's right for everyone, and therefore everybody should be just like me, and that was not something I was for. All right, so looking in the chat, it looks like most of you, again, are for William Jennings Bryan, although a few McKinley supporters. And now remember, this is when McKinley ran with there you go, that boy there. Theodore Roosevelt. I keep saying Thomas. Theodore Roosevelt was his running mate. So that's another kind of crazy thing about this election, because that might be, maybe you're really just voting for Theodore Roosevelt, even though he didn't want that job, and it's kind of... All right, so maybe a lot of you are saying McKinley for that reason, although I'm starting to see Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs is running at this point. Yep, this is I believe, the first of 5 elections that he ran for president. There's Adlai Stevenson. Yeah. All right. So, okay, we know what happens with McKinley. He does get reelected, mostly because the economy and most Americans are all about us becoming a global superpower. But he's assassinated, and Theodore Roosevelt takes over. Let's get to the election of 1904. Oh, JV Tonello, hi from Brazil, love your videos. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, so 1904, Theodore Roosevelt is very popular. It's going pretty well. He ends up being like quite different than William McKinley in many ways. He's still like foreign policy, very similar, but in terms of like he wants more regulation of industry. He's a conservationist. He wants to be more aggressive. At least his rhetoric says he wants to be more aggressive with monopolies. He's also a charismatic guy. People forget he was extremely charismatic. He knew exactly what to say, when to say. He was a younger guy, a kind of like a pretend war hero of the Spanish-American War. Very appealing. It's hard not to like Teddy Roosevelt. Look at that. I mean, the guy is known as a trust buster. And then his opponent is Alton Parker. Alton Parker is one of the worst major party candidates to ever run for president in American history. Just a boring dude. In so many ways, opposite of Teddy Roosevelt's larger-than-life personality. I would have been living in 1904. I would have been cast under the spell of Teddy Roosevelt, no doubt, despite some differences I might have had with him. So, yeah, I would have gone with Teddy Roosevelt, and his running mate was Charles Fairbanks, another solid leader. All right, I need to plug in my lights, so bear with me here while I do that. These things don't last too long. Intermission in 1904. Intermission. Surprisingly, I don't have to go to the bathroom. All right. So 1904, who did you go with? Oh, we have a lot of people there for Eugene Debs. Okay. Yeah, Eugene Debs is I get his appeal as well. Like, he's kind of like the working man's working man, the dude who truly represents us. But he's today we know him as a socialist, a dirty word today. Okay, a lot of you still are, yeah. I don't see one person yet who's a Alton Parker supporter. Any Alton Parker supporters in there? Not one. I'm so sorry, Alton. Okay, on to the election of 1908. This election marks the return of William Jennings Bryan, who did not run in 1904 because, frankly, he was a fan of Teddy Roosevelt. He was okay with Teddy Roosevelt because a lot of his ideas that he had championed for many years, Teddy Roosevelt co-opted. He was cool with it. But now that Teddy Roosevelt was not running for a third term, which would have been his second election as a presidential candidate, but he decides he's done, and then he has his boy anyway, William Taft, to take his place. William Taft is his protege, just like Martin Van Buren was a protege of Andrew Jackson, supposedly, or James Polk, I guess. Yeah, so we have Taft, who it appears, if I was alive in 1908, it appears he would just continue what Teddy Roosevelt had started, right? So, and then he's running with James Sherman. James Sherman, remember, a very important progressive politician. Let's get James Sherman back up there. I don't know if not to be confused with, there's other Shermans, but he's from New York. New York, yeah. Let's see. We have William Jennings Bryan is like, okay, I'll be honest with you. In 1908, both candidates are pretty good. So it'd be tough. I would be satisfied with either one getting elected. I think ultimately, though, I'd go with William Taft. And because, Taft is also somewhat appealing because he doesn't really want to do it. And then, like, the saying back then in 1908 was like, well, vote for Taft. You can vote for Bryan anytime. Because by this time, William Jennings Bryan is, like, always running for president as it seems. So, he probably should have quit a few years ago. So I'm going with William Taft. James Sherman is running mate. Hey, there's Eugene Debs, who keeps running as well. And then in the chat, it looks like we have a lot of Debs supporters here. Yeah, and maybe some of you are getting upset with me for not supporting Eugene Debs, but you notice that I haven't voted for a third-party candidate in a while. The main political third party throughout this time, has been the Prohibition Party, and I'm not for the Prohibition Party. I'm not for Prohibition, okay? But yeah, it's looking like in the chat, we have more Taft than Bryan, and we have a lot of Debs. So, interesting. Okay, Blue Tides, thanks for the donation. Says Taft Gang in all caps. What else we got here? Sunflower Socialist. Hey, another Kansan here. Check out his work. You got to go Debs at least once. He was living in Kansas in 1908. Oh, that's right. I forgot that he was living here around that time. All right, all right. I hear you. Well, you'll be pleasantly surprised here in a moment. Mr. Man Person Guy, I already got you. Okay, I think I'm caught up on super chats. Okay, so it looks like most of you are saying Taft. You agree with me, but a lot of Debs support. I'm telling you, this Debs guy. Look at the mustache, though. Debs doesn't even have hair. Go with that mustache. Okay, anyway. So let's go to 1912, one of the most interesting elections in American history, one of my favorite to look at. Same with Will from Exploring History. We loved the chat about this election. So fun. So many great stories related to it. A four-way race. Once again, it's been a while since we had a four-way race. Lapis Lee Fully, thank you for the donation, says 1908 is a good election because I'd be extremely happy with both candidates. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. 1912 has another solid lineup of candidates. I mean, Woodrow Wilson, let's start with him. He's a Democrat. He's actually promising. He seems like all on board with progressive ideals. You know, some of his, if I've been paying attention to what he had written, he had a lot of writings out. Like I know, like okay, that would have been troublesome for me about Woodrow Wilson. Remember, I don't know what happens later. This is just assuming that I'm alive in 1912. Then we have the return of freaking Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, we thought he was gone. Well, you know, shooting elephants. Look at that on the photo op. But he's back because apparently he was not happy with how his boy, William Howard Taft, was doing as president the last 4 years. He thought that he wasn't progressive enough and he wasn't doing exactly what he had laid out in his playbook or whatever. And so Teddy Roosevelt's back, and a lot of it's ego-driven, though. And that would be a big turnoff to me in 1912. All right? I just feel like you got Teddy Roosevelt. I liked him when he was president, but your time is done, man. You're coming back and you're kind of messing things up. You know, you're going to end up getting Woodrow Wilson elected here. What are you doing? You're splitting up the Republican Party, starting this own political party that's purely based on, like, I mean, literally walking out of the convention. William Taft is, you know, I don't think he's done necessarily a horrible job. I think he's done solid. I don't think he's kept up your legacy for the most part. Now, Teddy Roosevelt's he's talking about even crazier ideas like universal health care, which I would be very excited about. But so did Eugene Debs. And Eugene Debs is more popular than ever before. He might even have a chance to win this thing. Minimum wage for women, 8-hour workday, child labor. You know what? I think Teddy Roosevelt is straight up just stealing the ideas of Eugene Debs. I'm going to go with the socialist this time. Be thankful. I wrote it down here if you don't believe me. Eugene Debs is who I would vote for in 1912 with Emil Seidel, who was the mayor of Milwaukee, as his running mate. Because why not? Because, you know, we've seen William Taft and Teddy Roosevelt who seem disingenuous, or not disingenuous. They seem like they were riding the tide at this point. And in terms of who is really a man of the people is Eugene Debs. And I know that term socialist today scares people, but screw it. Back then it wasn't such a dirty word because it kind of meant something else anyway. And let's see who you vote for. I know some of you might be surprised. All right. I'm seeing Teddy. Okay, still a lot of Eugene Debs. Don't be a socialist. This is 109 years ago. Oh, Marcus Yorema, thank you. Hey, Mr. Beat, always enjoy your videos. Keep on keeping on. Thank you very much, Marcus. Oh, wow. We still see a lot of support for Teddy. And remember, this is the election that Teddy Roosevelt got shot right before he gave a speech, and he just decided to keep giving the speech anyway. A true bad you-know-what. But I think, you know, Eugene Debs will run for president from prison later on, so that's pretty cool, too. Yeah, there's Seidel, his running mate. But I think most people agree they don't want Wilson. I see a few people supporting Taft. This is we're all divided on this, similar to how it actually was in 1912. I don't know, like the chat seems to be all over the place. I am seeing Deb's name up here just as much as Teddy. So, and we all agree that not Wilson. Okay, moving on. Such a fun election. 1916. Okay, 1916. Oh, jumping ahead. 1916. Wow, a lot has changed in 4 years again. So now it's we have a world war going on. That Wilson has been president for 4 years. He promises not to get us involved in that war, although things like the sinking of the Lusitania are inching us closer to that war. Wilson has he's created the income tax. I'm not a fan of the income tax. The Federal Reserve, okay, I get why we have it, but still a nefarious institution that, Herb Gamer says Eugene Debs is overhyped. You're probably right. He's kind of like Huey Long in that regard, I guess. But yeah, Wilson, I probably at this point would not be too excited about. I do like he's saying, I'm going to keep you out of war. Okay, I do like that. But so is Charles Evan Hughes, his running mate. He's saying the same thing more or less. Maybe not as open about it, but he doesn't want us to get involved with World War I as well. Which, by the way, they didn't call it World War I back then. It was I don't even know what they called it. The Great War is all they called it. Yeah. This would be a tough one, but I think I would lean towards Charles Evan Hughes, the only Supreme Court justice who is currently there to run for this office. Now, Taft later would join. I mean, I have a bias towards Supreme Court justices. They're very smart in general. They tend to be that way. They tend to be level-headed, logical, pragmatic, all the qualities I look for. Maybe I wouldn't be that excited about Charles Evan Hughes, but I would go for him. Besides, again, Charles Fairbanks would be his running mate, another likable leader. Eugene Butler says, abolish the income tax. Heck yeah. Thank you for the super chat. Cold War 45 says, Hughes 1916, Wilson segregated the federal government. Yeah, that's another thing he did. Incredibly racist dude who he had famously what's the movie that he screened at the White House? I'm forgetting right now. Set racial relations back greatly. He did. Straight up, just horrible in that regard. Horrible. So yeah, I think Hughes is the guy. Gregory F. says apparently the 16th Amendment was Taft. Okay, but Wilson supported it though. So maybe I got that wrong, yeah. Birth of a Nation, thank you. Yeah, Birth of a Nation, he screened at the White House. There's a lot of good information about that on the Cynical Historians channel, by the way. Thank you for 20 of you all saying that in the chat at the same time. Okay, let's move ahead to... So Wilson does get reelected, mostly because of that promise of keeping the United States out of war. They go to war anyway. It's... Fortunately for the United States, we enter the war late enough where we don't see the casualties like European countries do. But by 1920, the war is over. 1919 was one of the craziest years, if not the craziest year in American history. Lots of chaos. Wilson has a severe stroke, is barely even cognizant of what's going on. Edith Wilson, his wife, is kind of running the show during a lot of this. It's not going well for Wilson. Now he's somebody who gets a lot of positive attention for after World War I when he was pushing for his 14 points and the League of Nations and sovereignty rights for nations across the world. He should get credit for that. Ultimately, the League of Nations does get created. The United States does not join it. I would say Woodrow Wilson, though, is still, his legacy is still, even in 1920, I would already, as a voter, I'd be like, okay, I'm just not. And he ends up actually wanting to run, but drops out. And then James Cox is kind of thrown in there. James Cox is, he's not somebody who seems like he's sincere. I go back and read some of his speeches. He doesn't seem like, I can really get behind somebody who he doesn't really seem to walk the walk. If you look at his what he did before, actually a little bit more about James. A lot of people don't know about James Cox. His running mate is Franklin Roosevelt, a young Franklin Roosevelt. He was in Ohio politics before he got involved with national politics. I think. No, I got the other way around, or was it between? No, I guess he was in the House of Representatives before he got. So he was governor of Ohio. Um, he was somebody who I think was too closely tied with the special interests. That's what I know about James Cox. Warren Harding is too, though. Warren Harding is usually like, okay, he's kind of handpicked as this guy, like, oh, he'll do whatever we want. And that's why they picked him. So again, we have an election where it's two candidates that I'm not that excited for. The rhetoric I do like more from Harding. He's talking about a return to normalcy and a return to how it was before, after these years of chaos. That would be appealing to me. Plus, his running mate is Calvin Coolidge, who I at that time would be a fan of. Calvin Coolidge, as governor of Massachusetts, and just knowing a little about him that I would have known, I would have been like, yeah, I kind of like this guy. Anyway, I know James Cox having Franklin Roosevelt, a distant cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, would be appealing as well. But again, this would be a tough election for me. So who do you think in the chat? Who do you think? Cold War 45 says more of a Cox guy, even though he wasn't a great candidate, but Harding's corruption and at the time rumors of infidelity are too much for me. Plus FDR as his running mate helps Cox. Yeah, you make good points there. I think a lot of the corruption wasn't well known about Harding until much after. And so I think as a voter in 1920, I would have been like, oh, what corruption of Harding? Like, what's he do? He seems like a nice guy. And he was a nice guy. A lot of people really, really liked him. I'm also biased towards Harding. Oh, yeah, there's Eugene Debs. Ran for president again, a fifth time, from prison this time because of freaking Woodrow Wilson. And Warren Harding later would pardon him, by the way, get him out of prison. Good for Harding on that. I would be biased towards Harding because of his journalist past as well. He was a journalist. He was a newspaper guy. So, yeah, I'd vote for Harding. Believe it or not, even though you know that he made my worst president list a few years ago. Isn't that crazy? I'd have Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge. And Coolidge is one of my favorite presidents, okay? So it's looking like in the chat, of course, you're all for Eugene Debs again. What the heck? I don't know at this point why, but all right. Although I'm seeing a lot of support for Cox, I'm not seeing as much support for Harding, so it looks like a lot of you all disagree with me. Oh, somebody lives 20 minutes from James Cox's house. All right, interesting. But yeah, a lot of Deb support in the chat. It looks like a lot more Cox support, FDR support maybe mostly, and less Harding support. Okay, let's go to 1924. This is another interesting election. Ooh, that image was, yeah, I forgot about that one. 1924, you got a three-way race. You got Warren Harding had died in office, so his vice president, Calvin Coolidge, has taken over. So he's the Republican candidate. The Democratic candidate is John Davis, who is somebody who, again, was not that into running for president. That is appealing to me, but doesn't mean he was kind of like a blah type of character. So was Calvin Coolidge, though, the more I think about it, really. And then we have the very, very exciting Robert La Follette, who by this point was already legendary in progressive politics, basically a god in Wisconsin politics. Fighting Bob is his nickname. In my opinion, one of the best politicians in American history, the best senators, best governors, one of the best governors. So I'm torn between Calvin Coolidge and Robert La Follette. Those are my two now. Robert La Follette is in this new version of a progressive party. And it doesn't really, I could be pragmatic here because I'm thinking like, okay, I don't know, like maybe La Follette can still have influence in Congress and get some reforms made and we can have the best of both worlds here, you know what I mean? Like maybe La Follette is better not as president. And besides, the economy's gotten better. We had another little recession in 1921. It quickly recovered under Harding and Coolidge. I like Coolidge as a person. I like his he doesn't mean he's perfect. He had bad views on certain issues, but a lot of issues I agreed with him. He had a limited government approach generally. So I'm very tempted to vote for Fighting Bob in this election. Who would you vote for? 11 US says stay cool with Coolidge. Cold War 45 says Fighting Bob 24. Coolidge was too conservative, and Davis was just a Republican in Democratic clothing. Yeah, Davis was very similar actually to Coolidge with views. So you're of the two, I'd rather keep Coolidge in there. He had been doing a good job so far. Um, this is a tough one again. I think I'm leaning towards Calvin Coolidge. Most of you in the chat are pretty split, I think, between La Follette and Coolidge. I would say Calvin Coolidge, and his running mate was Charles Dawes. But just know that I would be torn between Coolidge and La Follette. Not an easy one. Not an easy decision. Remember, La Follette ran third party because he thought that Davis and Coolidge were like both essentially like too conservative, and that there needed to be a left-leaning alternative to that. The 1920s were a surprisingly conservative time in politics, national politics anyway. Oh yeah, Burton Wheeler is who he ran with. Fighting Bob and Burton Wheeler. Burton Wheeler was fantastic. Yeah, so we know Calvin Coolidge won that election and had a pretty solid 4 years. And so let's go to the election of 1928. And it's been 2 hours already. Holy crap. Okay. 1928, we have Herbert Hoover. Calvin Coolidge famously does not run for another term by just like not having a press conference, and he just puts on a piece of paper, I will not be seeking a third term, and handing that to all the reporters. Herbert Hoover is okay. Yeah, kind of we got a good thing going. The economy's going strong overall. As a voter in 1928, I would not be smart enough to realize that much of that was a mirage, that much of it was not real. Much of that new wealth that was being added to the GDP was not actually real, and farmers were struggling. I probably would have been more sensitive to the struggling farmers in Kansas. So maybe I would have been a little hesitant with Herbert Hoover for that reason. Oh, Hiram Bifidum, thank you so much. How come no one ever talks about what were called consolidated labor post-American Civil War? That was really, really, really bad. Okay, yeah, thanks for bringing it to our attention. So we have Al Smith on the other side, governor of New York, as you can see there. Al Smith is the first Roman Catholic to run for president in terms of like being the major party candidate, with Joseph Taylor Robinson from Arkansas, like two opposite guys in many ways, one from the north, one from the south. I would be torn on this election as well. As you can see, in the 1920s, it's very hard for me going back and forth. I did like Calvin Coolidge, but I do like especially how Al Smith is talking about ending prohibition. And so I would probably lean toward, I'm voting for Al Smith in 1928 and his running mate Joseph Taylor Robinson. How about you? Cold War 45 says Smith in 28, a surprisingly good governor who doesn't get the credit he deserves these days. Yeah, he was a very good governor. And really a big influence on Franklin Roosevelt as well. He doesn't get enough credit for his influence on Franklin Roosevelt. Unfortunately, a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment in 1928 is why he didn't get elected. Plus, things were going well for the Republican Party in the 1920s. All right, looks like most of you are saying Smith in the comments as well. That's awesome. Let's go to 1932, and wow, what has happened between 1928 and 1932? Quite a freaking lot. The Great Depression now is happening in 1932. Hoover's term does not go well. The stock market crashes of 1929 into 1930, the banking crisis, the bank runs, the bubble popping, bursting, all the wealth lost, people losing their life fortunes, unemployment by 1932 getting to be 25%. It's not going well, and Hoover's making the problem worse. Let's all agree on that. I hope you can agree on that. White Tyler Perry says Al Smith. Yeah, sorry I was late to that one. Okay. I think you already know where I'm going in 1932. I'm voting for change, for the hope candidate, the one who's going to get us out of this dark depression. When Hoover you know, everything he does seems to make the problem worse. Even what he's saying, the optics even, is making it worse. Uh, I'm going with Franklin Roosevelt in 1932. And most Americans would have agreed with me in 1932. His running mate was John Nance Garner, who famously called Hoover a socialist, criticizing him. And I would have just, you know what, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, do something to end this horrible depression we're in. So it's looking like in the chat already a lot of FDR voters in 1932. Cold War 45 says I'd vote for FDR in 32. I'd be very, very tempted to vote Thomas because I'd feel capitalism has failed. Oh, okay. So Thomas, the socialist candidate, right? Wait, is that 36 or 32? Yeah. Norman Thomas, right? Yeah, it was 1932. Yeah, a lot of people don't know who you're talking about. Norman Thomas was the socialist candidate, also a pacifist from Ohio, who ran in 1932. There's the Hoovervilles, or yeah. So yeah, Smoot-Hawley tariff is famously also one of the worst laws ever passed in American history that Hoover signed. Not a good idea. All right, so sorry, Hoover. It's looking like most of you in the chat also did not vote for you. 1936. So now we have some New Deal legislation that has been passed. FDR is able to get done a lot in his 4 years in his first term. His opponent, though, it's interesting, is a governor from my home state of Kansas. So you might be asking, like, what about the favorite son aspect of this? You're from Kansas. Won't you vote for your Kansas boy? You know? And here's the thing. Things are getting better. Like the New Deal legislation I would largely have supported by 1936. Like, yeah, I know that the government has a lot more power than it used to, but a lot of the stuff I think is long-term actually a net positive for the country. You know, I'm a little worried about inefficiencies in the federal government and government waste, but at this point, please just do anything. And he's doing everything he can to end the Great Depression. And things are getting better. Unemployment's going down. You know, the GDP is looking better. Like everything seems to go in the right seems to be going in the right direction. So that's why I'm like looking at Franklin Roosevelt. Alf Landon did not campaign much at all. Was actually somebody who was like, do you even really want to be president? And I kind of want to keep him at home, though. He's a likable guy, but I kind of want to keep him at home. So let's see what you say in the... Jack Reed, 36, says Jeremy Franklin. Max Pokebra, 69T, he says, I would vote for FDR in 1932 and 1936, but after the Japanese internment camps, I would sit out the 1940 and 1944 elections. Yeah, I feel you on that. Daniel Diaz says, Kingfish, would you consider doing a video on Huey Long besides the governor's one? Definitely. Kingfish died. I hate to break it to you. If he was alive in 1936, I would have voted for Huey Long. I really think I might have voted for him. But he was assassinated before he could run. I will probably make another video about him eventually, but I will tell you that Emperor Tiger Star, there he is. Emperor Tiger Star, that's not Emperor Tiger Star, that's Huey Long. But yeah, Huey Long, there's a video by Emperor Tiger Star that's already out there. It's really good. Check it out. So yeah, I would vote for, believe it or not, Franklin Roosevelt for re-election because things are headed in the right direction. Still with John Nance Garner as his running mate. And I'm sorry, Alf Landon, we just need you at home. I know you're the governor of Kansas, but I should vote for you for president as a favorite son, but no, I'm going to keep you around here. Okay, let's go to 1940. And it's looking like most of you in the chat, by the way, are saying FDR, although there's surprisingly a lot of Alf Landon supporters there. That's interesting. Okay, 1940. 1940, we have, Franklin Roosevelt running for a third term here. Hold up. Okay, Rob Henderson, thank you. Who do you believe is the most evil president ever? Evil is such a subjective word. I really don't know. Andrew Jackson seems like an easy one to say for that, but I just don't know. Thomas Jefferson, you could say is evil for what he did. Some of the things he did really. It's kind of crazy to think about. But anyway, so it looks like in the chat already in 1940, everyone's okay with Franklin Roosevelt running for a third term. I am a little troubled by the fact that this dude wants to run for a third term and break that two-term tradition that George Washington started. What are you thinking, you power-hungry son of a... But okay, to his defense, a lot of people are really pressuring him to run for a third term. And, it's the country still suffering with the Great Depression. And by this point, it's now been going on for more than 10 years. The thing that kind of makes me curious, though, is this guy running up against him, Wendell Willkie, the Republican candidate against Franklin Roosevelt. He's a businessman. He's an outsider, so he's not from Washington, D.C. He's truly an outsider. He's saying, I'm for the New Deal programs. I'm just thinking like they haven't been carried out well enough. Now, the other thing to think about is Franklin Roosevelt in 1940 is now running with Henry Wallace, who, as if you've seen my vice president, there he is. My vice president video, he is my favorite vice president in American history, Henry Wallace. So I might be swayed by Henry Wallace joining the ticket with FDR. Oh yeah, Eugene Butler just commented, thank you for the super chat. Says Henry Wallace is the OG Bernie. Alexander Rose says Willkie was too liberal for today's Democratic Party. And Roblox Rock, thanks for the donation. I will tell you, yeah, Wendell Willkie he may have been a pro-capitalist guy, but he was for these safety net programs. He just thought that, government generally was not doing well carrying them out. So, believe it or not, this would have been a tough election for me, but I would have been a little turned away from FDR because of the third term to begin with. And I'm like, let's just get a change. Let's get somebody new in there. I would have voted for Wendell Willkie in 1940. Charles McNary was his running mate. And it would have been tough, but I think I would have taken a gamble on this one. Who do you think? Okay, I'm seeing Norman Thomas again. A lot of Wilkies. A lot of reluctant FDRs, but it's pretty split. If I scroll up a ways, though, I'm seeing a lot more Franklin Roosevelt. So, okay. Yeah, pretty split. Okay. Maybe FDR has the edge in the chat. So, but yeah, so you all know what happens next between 1940 and 1944. Actually, 1940 already it had been happening. We just were not involved with it. We were increasingly getting involved. Both Willkie and Roosevelt didn't want to go to war. World War II started in 1939, and then of course 1941, after FDR is elected for a third term, we have the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and Congress declares war on Japan and thus Germany after, and we are straight up all involved in both the European theater and Pacific theater of World War II. So jump ahead to 4 very long years later, 1944. At this point, I'm just like, you know what? We have been at war, in the worst war in human history. You kind of want to keep the same leader. That's what I'm kind of thinking here. No offense to Thomas Dewey, the Republican challenging him. Zachary Parker. Hey, Zachary, also a Patreon supporter. If you're not writing in Harold Stassen every year from 1944 until 2000, then you're not voting properly. That's right. Harold Stassen ran for every election from 1944 until 2000. That's a great reference there. I love that. Roblox Rock says I'm pretty right-leaning. I probably would have voted for a Democrat if the Republicans are doing bad, like Obama or Clinton in 1996. FDR first two. Yep. That's good. That means you're an open-minded voter. It's good to be open-minded and not be so partisan. Matthew Palevsky says, what do you think would happen if Wallace became president? I think he would have been a great president, frankly. He was terrific. Okay. It's looking like most of you are sticking with FDR for the election of 1944, although I'm seeing some Thomas Dewey fans in there. Dewey had lots of experience. He was an intelligent politician, very proactive in with lawmaking. But, Franklin Roosevelt had not only the war going on, but all this momentum. Now, there's Harry Truman. Remember that Harry Truman now took the place of Henry Wallace as his running mate because of there were some folks that didn't like Henry Wallace because he was shaking things up too much. And so I'm cool with Harry Truman as much as, I do like Henry Wallace a lot, but okay. Eric Escobedo, thank you. FDR also proposed the Second Bill of Rights in 1944, so even though I would oppose the Japanese internment camps, I still probably would have voted for him. I'm glad you brought up the Japanese internment camps. I would have been strongly against that, and that would be the thing that really would have driven me to Thomas Dewey. But here's the thing you got to remember. Thomas Dewey, to my knowledge, did not come out and speak out against the Japanese internment camps. If anybody can find evidence that he did, throw it at me. Maybe I'll change my mind. But otherwise, I'm going FDR for this election reluctantly. I'm voting a third time for Franklin Roosevelt. And it looks like most of you are as well in the chat. Free American Empire says, I've always found it interesting that there are so many fans of FDR. I personally am not a fan because of his expansion of the federal government. You got to look at how the government is expanded. And I used to have similar opinions about Franklin Roosevelt until I learned more about him and I read more of his writings and his speeches. His goal always was more liberty. That's what he always said. Like, I want the average American to have more liberty. And if these social welfare programs lead to more liberty for your average American, then I'm for it. It doesn't mean that I think, because remember, this is a time when he was president when a lot of the world was being taken over by fascist dictators. And he was kind of like one of the lone democratic leaders to like fight back against that. He could have easily went that route of a demagogue, but he did not. So that's another thing to consider. I mean, he's a complicated figure. I think FDR gets painted too, simply and with a broad brush. William Pearson Mangum. Whoa, did you just create your username to be like, because of what I said earlier in this live stream? Why was the internment of Japanese Americans so popular during this time? It was blatantly unconstitutional, but it happened anyway. Because they were racist. They were racist against the Japanese. That's the simple answer to that question. Racism was mainstream, especially after Pearl Harbor. So yeah, it's a horrible part of FDR's legacy. That's the reason why FDR is not higher in my list for best presidents, is because of the internment of Japanese Americans. One of the worst things that our government ever did. Ever. Anyway, let's move on. I'm spending too long on 1944. So the war is over. Now we're to one of my favorite elections to look at, 1948. World War II ends in 1945, so it is a long 3 years afterwards that this election takes place. Three-way race because of the split in the Democratic Party. Thomas Dewey is once again the candidate who is actually, all the polls are saying that he has a good chance to win this thing. Remember, there's a surprise result with this, with Harry Truman famously holding up that paper that says Dewey defeats Truman that they printed before, because they were just so sure that Dewey was going to win. Truman ends up winning a close race. Truman had a fairly low approval rating. Things were not going that well in the previous couple years, 1946 to 1948. I thought that if I was around in 1948, I would have thought that Truman essentially had to deal with a lot of stuff that was really difficult. So it didn't matter who you threw in that position. He was president during a very, very difficult time, making that decision to drop the atomic bombs and ending the war, dealing with the Soviet Union after the war, the Marshall Plan. Yeah, that's a positive part of the Truman administration. It was an election that I would have been sympathetic to Truman. I would not have been so harsh on him as so many Americans were, or especially so many pundits were. All right. I think Cold War 45, yeah, says, I think if Long or a Coughlin type had won in 1936, we may have gone in a somewhat authoritarian direction, if not fascist. Coughlin, definitely. I don't think so much Long. I think Long gets that reputation. I just don't think that would have been the case at the national level. He was a little bit that way with local politics, but Christian Arnold says, what draws me towards Republicans is inflation. It seems that every time a Dem is in office, prices for everything increases. That's what gets me. Yeah, inflation, the fear is real. I get that. That's a really legitimate reason to support Republicans, because throughout history, they tend to be the ones who are more concerned with inflation. They're more of the Hayek mindset versus the Keynesian mindset. Clayton Stevens, thank you. Was there ever an atheist mainstream presidential candidate? Unless you call Bernie Sanders that. Not really, I don't think. Okay. So back to 1948. So we have Harry Truman running now with Alvin Barkley as his candidate. Oh, there's Eisenhower, but he was not. He declined. You have Henry Wallace, who's in that election running with Glenn Taylor. He didn't make the thumbnail because he didn't do very well in the election. You have Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond, let's see here. Oh, gosh. Fielding Wright. That was the guy he was running with. Fielding Wright was Strom. Now, these are Dixiecrats. Strom Thurmond, who was a senator, who was in Congress for decades. Huge influence. He was a segregationist at this time in 1948. Later on, he changed his views, but he was somebody who thought that the status quo was good. Racial segregation was good. So this was a big reason why he broke off from the Democratic Party. I hope you already know that I'm not going to be a fan at all of Strom Thurmond in 1948. Thomas Dewey, again, I'm not that excited about. Harry Truman, not either. I'm going to go ahead with this guy that you see on the screen right now. Henry Wallace is my protest vote in Kansas in 1948. Who, he did get quite a few votes. Let's look at the results here. He got 4th place. Let me see the map. There's the map. So my state went to Dewey, which is interesting. Because, Missouri, Kansas City area is Harry Truman being from there. So yeah, a lot of people around me, if I was living in Kansas in 1948, where I'm at now, a lot of people around me probably would have been Harry Truman supporters, but I would have been probably given my protest. I think it was closer than, let me look at the county map here do I have that up here? I don't know if I have the county map. Oh, well. But I know people would have said I was wasting my vote, but I would have loved Henry Wallace so much. And Glenn Taylor, the guy who ran with him, so fun. Such a crazy character in American history that many don't know about. No, not that Glenn Taylor. Glenn H. Taylor. There we go. This guy was interesting. You should check him out sometime. That was another progressive party, by the way, another version of a progressive party. All right, Clayton Stevens already. Okay, Jack L. Truman in 48. Farmer, infantryman, only 20th century president not to go to college. Yeah, I like that appeal as well. A true man of the people, also representing my beloved Missouri. Oh, yeah, represent. Yeah, I do like Truman. I'm a big fan of him. He's one of my favorite presidents, but that's based on now. Like, I'm just living in 1948, I think. Okay, let's see who you say in the chat. Who do you vote for in the chat for 1948? A lot of Wallace fans as well. Strom Thurmond, really? That's interesting. I like Ike. A lot of Wallace support in the chat. We got some Truman, nobody for Dewey. Okay, there's a Dewey. There's a couple Deweys. Ted Cruz wasn't alive in. Oh, that was for 2024. Okay. All right, let's move on to 1952. 1952 is finally they talk Dwight Eisenhower into running. And so he is the war hero from World War II. Guess what? From Kansas, raised in my home state. I'm going to be extremely biased towards him. So the favorite son phenomenon, regionalism. And his running mate is Richard Nixon, somebody who is a pretty firm Cold War guy, like in terms of talking trash against the Soviet Union and communism. Maybe a little bit too much for my taste, but I can deal with Nixon. He seems fairly harmless, right? Eisenhower, though, I'm a big fan of, and he chooses the Republican Party to run with. He could have easily ran as a Democrat. He could have. Eisenhower could have. The political parties back then were much more similar than they were different. Much more. Adlai Stevenson, so not to be confused with other Adlai Stevensons in American history, but he's the Illinois guy. If you don't know much about Adlai Stevenson, you should probably, because he ran not once but twice for president in the 50s there. He's Adlai Stevenson II. Governor of Illinois while he's running for president. Lots of experience. Very intelligent guy. The term egghead comes from his opponents making fun of him, the way the shape of his head was shaped like an egg, apparently. I don't know. It's mean. Who would you vote for in this election? Oh, another thing to consider is, we're back at war already, folks. The Korean War has been going on. We've been involved for a couple years. That's a war that has been actually quite devastating for many Americans. Like tens of thousands of Americans have died in it. Eisenhower's like, we need to get out of the Korean War. We need to end this war. Truman, that was one of his biggest blunders, was getting us involved in it to a point where we were losing so many Americans. That escalated beyond how anybody imagined it would at the time. So yeah, I'm voting for Eisenhower, the peace candidate, and the war hero, and from Kansas. And he's a good leader. He's level-headed. He's pragmatic. He's awesome. Let's see in the comments who you're voting for here. Oh, there's Taft, Robert Taft. Looks like a lot of you in the comments are saying, we like Ike. Although there's a random Douglas MacArthur. Eggheads for Prez. All right. Chat, BP Plays says chat like Ike. Yeah, I would say that seems to be the consensus. Okay. 1956 onward. So Dwight Eisenhower has been president for 4 years. We got out of the war. We stopped the war, the Korean War. Well, at least the armistice was signed. And so things are kind of relatively peaceful. We got the Cold War is heating up. We have lots of tension with the Soviet Union. There's the anti-communism hysteria, the second Red Scare. Eisenhower, though, distances himself from McCarthy. Good for him. He distances himself from the paranoia. He pushes for civil rights. Brown versus Board of Education has happened by this point. Says he's going to enforce it. Interstate highway system, modernization, solidifying the New Deal social programs, high tax rate on the super wealthy. At the same time, I'm a little worried about Eisenhower and some of his conservative, mixing religion and government troubles me a little bit. So I'm not so sure about that. So I look over and there's Adlai Stevenson again, Adlai Stevenson II. And what's crazy about Adlai Stevenson II, first of all, he gets Estes Kefauver, that guy on the right there. Let's go back and see. Estes Kefauver. He gets him. Oops. Estes Kefauver he's another man of the people type character. And he's also somebody who has made a career out of fighting corruption. I like this ticket, folks. I think it's one of the most underrated tickets ever. And me being a fan of Eisenhower, being from Kansas, I like Eisenhower a lot. But I'm actually in a dilemma here in 1956. Adlai Stevenson actually is talking about things that more and more, he's talking about universal basic income. He's talking about more reforms that would solidify the New Deal. Plus, he's like a separation of church and state because of Eisenhower like mixing religion and state a little bit too much. So this one is really close for me, surprisingly. Going back and re-examining this one, I was surprised. Like I just thought I'd be an Eisenhower all the way, but what do you think in the chat? What do we think? Okay, Ike's foreign policy too. Like a lot of your okay, that troubles me a little bit. I don't like the domino theory as much either. Adlai Stevenson's talking to say we need to tone it down. This rhetoric against the Soviet Union. All right, looks like most of you are still I like Ike. All right, I'm gonna like totally surprise you, and I'm going with Adlai Stevenson in this one. I think at this point, I'm changing my mind because of Kefauver, but also because of the fact that some of what Eisenhower has done is scary. Oh yeah, Cold War 45 also. Thank you for the continuing to donate. You're amazing. Eisenhower had a heart attack not long before this election, so I'd be concerned about him running for a second term in regards to his health, as I wouldn't want Nixon to potentially become POTUS. That's another thing. I'm increasingly a little concerned about Nixon, although Nixon's not really that. He's still mostly harmless at this point. Eisenhower did have a heart attack. He's getting up there in age for, not being the most healthy. Yeah, take a chance on Adlai Stevenson. Now, that said, Eisenhower winning in 1956, I'm okay with that. Totally okay with that. But it looks like most of you are leaning towards Ike again, although I'm seeing more Adlai Stevenson support as well. That's pretty cool. Go for the egghead. The ratio says I'm a communist, but Eisenhower is definitely my favorite Republican president. I like Ike. I love Eisenhower. Today, I love him. Just like Truman, he's like maybe my new favorite president now, Eisenhower. Now, there's things about him that are bad. Don't get me wrong. I get messages, I get emails sometimes from people like, did you know that Eisenhower did this? I get it. Okay. Moving on to the election of 1960. Oof. Probably really the most, other than 2000, closest election in modern American history. So 1960, we have a very exciting candidate, John F. Kennedy, a young guy again, similar to Teddy Roosevelt, who is like very charismatic. He's Catholic, which is interesting, but now people don't seem to care as much about his religion. And then we have Richard Nixon, the guy who now has experience. It's like, it's my turn. It's my turn. Had been vice president the previous 8 years, and this is a tough decision for me. It's looking already in the chat that I can tell you more people are for JFK. I don't know. Part of what JFK, like something I'm a little worried about is that, okay, he's not really that experienced, and like I feel like he has a great story. He's a war hero. He's somebody who like seems passionate, has great ideas. He actually is bringing up civil rights where Nixon didn't really bring it up much. But in terms of like just intelligence, like listening to the debates, not watching it on TV, just listening to the debates on the radio, it seems like Nixon knows what he's talking about more. If you're somebody who's like all in for JFK right now, I want you to go back and listen to some of those debates. Just listen to them. And it sounds like Nixon really does know more about what he's talking about. He's more prepared. It's like he's been preparing his whole life for this. Looking in the chat, though, most of you are all about JFK. Let's see what else here. All right. Furry Foxytail says, you have not read my super chat, and what did you think about the left hate freedom of speech, and what do you think about Fox now and CNN? I'm not a fan of watching Fox or CNN either. The left hating freedom of speech is a bit of a broad statement. I don't even know what you mean when you say the left, because it doesn't even, like, what do you mean by the left? Ethan Ellis says, Ike versus Stevenson 1956 would have been like Trump versus Yang 2020 for me. If only Yang was the Democratic nominee. Yeah, I feel you on that. All right. So looking at the chatting, and I don't know, maybe some of you are leaning Nixon. But overall, it looks like you're saying JFK. Eugene Butler, thanks for the donation. Okay, another thing that's really cool about Nixon in 1960 that people forget is that he actually campaigned in all 50 states. He even injured himself and kept on going. And he campaigned more than anybody I had seen up in American history up to that point. He was out there. listening to people. He really wanted this job badly. I would vote for Nixon in 1960. There, I said it. It was a tough one. I like JFK's appeal. I'm thinking, hey, I'll vote for JFK in 1964. He'll win next time. Okay, I didn't know that was going to happen, okay? Anyway, it would be a tough one. Remember, Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. was the running mate to Nixon, and I thought he was a solid choice, lots of experience. But most of you look like JFK was your guy. Remember, this was a very close election. JFK barely won this one, and Nixon was pretty cool about it. He wasn't like, no, fake election. It's I'm the real winner here. No, he was very dignified losing this one, even though it was very. All right. Eugene Butler actually says, hey, do you wish to see future presidents like Biden who have ordinary educations, i.e. gone to state schools instead of Harvard Law School? Yes, frankly. If you hadn't figured it out by now, I'm a very anti-elite type of person. I want more just normal folks that were not lawyers who went to Harvard Law School or Princeton in there. JFK is too uptight. I would side with Nixon, says Vernon Schillinger. Samir A., thanks for the donation. All right, cool. We're moving on to 1964. And once again, 4 years later, but so much has happened. JFK becomes the fourth president assassinated. Horrible situation. Lyndon Johnson, his running mate in 1960, vice president, takes over, is sworn in immediately. Carries on much of the legacy of JFK, but even takes it up a notch. The bad thing about Lyndon Johnson is that he's escalating the Vietnam War. Not cool. Where JFK, there's some evidence saying that he may have decided this was a bad idea. We need to bring the troops home. Dylan, you're back. Dylan, I give you a shout out at the beginning. Welcome back. Despite his shortcomings, I realized there were many. Nixon was by far one of the most intelligent and qualified candidates, presidents in history. I agree. It's looking like in 1964, most of you in the chat are for LBJ so far. Willie Pearson Mangum says, what's your take on the JFK assassination? Do you think there was a conspiracy? I think the mafia was behind it. I don't want to get into that too much. I do think that we shouldn't just automatically discount these conspiracy theories because the Warren Commission was flawed. I've said that always, that the Warren Commission did not do a sufficient job letting us know what really happened. And that's why there's so many conspiracy theories. Okay. Light Yagami says 1964 isn't even a debate. Okay, let's look at Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater is the Republican running against LBJ, Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson, remember, has signed the Civil Rights Act by this point. He's not messing around. He's an aggressive guy pushing for social reforms, pushing for civil rights, pushing for a stronger safety net. Oh yeah, that guy, George Wallace. Barry Goldwater is against the Civil Rights Act. It doesn't mean that he was a bad person. He had actually, well thought out explanations for it. And he's actually a pretty principled guy, libertarian type person. There's much about Barry Goldwater that would have been appealing to me if I was around in 1964. What I did not like about Barry Goldwater was his rhetoric, but really just like threats of being more aggressive in the Cold War. He would have continued the Vietnam War just like Lyndon Johnson did, but he admitted it, and he was a little troublesome. Like that's why it was so effective for Lyndon Johnson getting elected, and Lyndon Johnson destroyed Barry Goldwater in this election, because crazy enough, Lyndon Johnson was the peace candidate in this election. Barry Goldwater was talking a really tough foreign policy. So, yeah, I would have voted for Lyndon Johnson in this election. Hubert Humphrey, the very nice senator from Minnesota, was his running mate. Hubert Humphrey is a pretty important figure in American history that many don't really think much about, I think, these days. Deputy President pro temporary of the United States Senate in the 70s. But yeah, he was just a nice guy. Kind of a good compliment to LBJ. So yeah, it looks like most of you in the comments want LBJ to win in 1964 as well. You're with me. Um, let's see here. Crap. Let's see. I'm missing some super chats here. Oh, Dylan, thanks for the shout out, Matt. Please remind people to buy your book, especially since it's so reasonably priced and well written. Well, that's nice of you to say. Buy the book, everybody. I have the link on Amazon. I can't believe I've been going almost 3 hours. This is crazy. I didn't think it would last this long. This is a school night. Lindsey Brown, Mr. B, will you officiate our wedding in St. Augustine, Florida, July 2nd, 20? I'm not allowed, or I'm not certified to do that. But maybe if I can get certified, I would love to visit beautiful St. Augustine, and that would be amazing, actually. Patriot Raven was one of the big reasons why Barry lost was due to him not wanting to support the Civil Rights Bill. I think that's part of it. The main thing is what you're seeing on the screen right now, the fact that commercials like that worked because people were afraid that we were going to go to war with the Soviet Union because of him. Yeah. Okay. Onward to 1968. And 1968 is somebody asked about this on TikTok, and I said, this was an interesting election. You got a three-way race. And 1968 is up there with 1919 as far as one of the most chaotic years in American history. Go ahead and let me know in the chat who you would vote for. Please don't say George Wallace. Some of you are just going to troll me and say George Wallace. Segregation now! Segregation! Anyway, okay. No, so obviously not George Wallace, the racist Alabama governor. Really more a demagogue and populist, though. Remember, he was popular more for his hot takes on economic issues, not just segregation was kind of just a side issue that he got attention for that we remember him for today. But let's focus on Richard Nixon, who is back. Richard Nixon, after taking a break after that close loss in 1960, is back as the Republican candidate versus the Democrat, which is Hubert Humphrey. He's a nice guy. He was the vice president under Lyndon Johnson, but again, Lyndon Johnson by this point was so disgraced he didn't even run for re-election, and he could have. And it's because of the Vietnam War mostly going so horribly wrong. And if you know anything about me, like me being around in 1968, I would have been one of the most vocal opponents of the Vietnam War. I would have been out there protesting with those hippies, you know. Nixon promised to bring the troops home and get out of Vietnam. Hubert Humphrey was like, don't worry. Towards the end there, he's like, don't worry, we have a plan to bring the troops home as well. Okay, so keep that in mind, because LBJ even had planned it right before the election. Looking at the chat, looks like, we're forgetting RFK. Robert F. Kennedy, of course, was supposed to be the darling of this election for the Democratic Party, is assassinated. There he is. He's assassinated. He probably would have been the candidate. And then Eugene McCarthy was there too. He was a good one. But Robert F. Kennedy would have been my guy. Hands down, I would have voted for Robert F. Kennedy with this. I would have been more passionate about him than his brother, John F. Kennedy. Frankly, I would have been very on board with this guy. Charismatic, huge ideas for major reforms that push us in the right direction. But yeah, he's out of the picture. So is McCarthy. I got to deal with Humphrey and Nixon and Wallace. So let's see here what you're saying here. Zachary Parker. Hey, Goldwater's running mate was from my neck of the woods, Lockport, New York. Despite him being conservative, his daughter hosts a popular left-wing talk show. I had no idea about that. Alley2567 says, thank you for that donation. I would have supported Nixon. Eisenhower had a detailed plan to take out Castro and beat the communists. I must have missed your comment from earlier. I'm sorry about that. While JFK fumbled the Bay of Pigs invasion, also the Kennedys were connected to the mafia. Well, it's true. Let's see. Cold War 45 says if Wallace had won, it would have been like what happened with Dumb Donald. Okay. Alley 2567 says I would have supported Nixon. The riots and the general craziness would have been too much for me. I feel you on that. Jack Espino says, do you think Johnson is an overrated or underrated president? He's so conflicting for me. He's conflicting for me as well. I think he tends to be a little bit underrated because of all his social welfare. But I mean, his war on poverty did not do what it intended to do. It did not end poverty. I think that his heart was in the right place a lot of times. He just made bad choices. I don't know. I think he's probably where he deserves to be in history, frankly, LBJ. But this is a chaotic time indeed. Somebody who, like Richard Nixon, I'm the law and order guy. That would be appealing. I think I would be torn between Humphrey, whose running mate was Edmund Muskie, senator from Maine, and Richard Nixon, whose running mate was Spiro Agnew. I think the reason why I would vote for Hubert Humphrey as a lesser of two evils is because Spiro Agnew is one of the people I would have despised. I'm just like, no. I could tell Spiro Agnew was crooked a mile away. So no to Spiro Agnew, so I guess I'm going to suck it up and vote for Hubert Humphrey in this one. Sorry. All right, Mark Irwin says, I got to say RFK is probably better than his brothers, way more empathetic and connected to all Americans. JFK was the face, Bobby was the heart. Well put, Mark. I couldn't have said it better myself. Well put. That's exactly what I was maybe trying to say earlier. All right. So yeah, lesser of two evils for 1968. 1972, we're getting close here, folks. Richard Nixon actually has a fairly successful first term, believe it or not. He starts to bring those troops home. Now they're still in Vietnam in 1972. So that's where George McGovern comes along. He's like, we need to bring them home now. You've been like lollygagging. You're like messing around in Cambodia. Stop it, Nixon. Bring them home now. He wanted a more aggressive withdrawal. That would have been really appealing to me coming from George McGovern. Remember, we don't know what's going on at the Watergate Hotel until later, until after the election in 1972. We don't know. Okay? So, we have Nixon, who is running for re-election. He's pretty popular. His approval ratings are pretty high in most polls. McGovern also he's a Midwestern guy. He's from South Dakota. Me being from Kansas kind of that's appealing. He has experience in Congress. So let's take a closer look at George McGovern. He kind of is like a laughing stock today. He wasn't the best speaker, wasn't the most charismatic, but he's the first like the primaries. They actually went for him. Like he wasn't one of the handpicked people at the convention. Like ordinary people voted for him. So he was a senator for a couple decades representing South Dakota. Later was involved with the executive branch under the Clinton administration. But I think we remember this election for him getting his butt kicked by Nixon, being like the foolish, contender. Like, what are you thinking? Like, you're in over your head, buddy. But I think I would have leaned towards him mostly because of, by this time in 1972, I think I would have been the type of person who was like, Shirley Chisholm, maybe I'll just vote for you, even though you didn't win the primary. But yeah, I would have been kind of starting to see through the BS of Nixon. Like, Nixon, you keep saying all these things, but you're not really delivering on everything. I appreciate some of what you do, but I don't know. And the main thing that really would have got me, I think I just saw a comment, the drug war started under Nixon. That would have been like the thing that drove me away from Nixon more than anything. So despite good things as far as environmental regulations that were put in place under him, pushing for more civil rights at the same time, saying racist things privately, and the war on drugs ended up being something that was negative for people of color. So signing the Controlled Substances Act during his first term. Let's see what you have to say, though. Okay, I must have missed it. Okay, somebody said up here something. I missed it. Oh, there it is. Prairie Fire Kowalski from Nebraska. 50 years later, Nixon drug war still destroying U.S. Couldn't agree more. Yep. So that would be the biggest thing to turn me away from Nixon. So I'm voting for George McGovern and his running mate, Sergeant Shriver, in 1972. And it's looking by the chat, surprisingly, most of you agree with me. Maybe you're thinking about Watergate too much. Hospers. Yeah, John Hosper is the first Libertarian candidate, 1972. He got an electoral vote. But it's looking like most of you are saying McGovern, some of you are saying Nixon. Okay, interesting. Let's go ahead and go to 1976, the year that my dad graduated high school. All right. He couldn't vote in this one. His first election was 1980. Same with my mom. So 1976 is, again, a time a lot has changed. Oh, thanks for the donation, History Hub. Okay, 1976 now, Watergate has happened. And it seems like the American public is turning against Washington, D.C. in general, and we're sick of the corruption and the special interests and just fire them all. And let's start new. Now, Gerald Ford is not elected as part of any ticket. He was appointed as vice president. He's like, I'm going to go for it and just try to get elected straight up. Gerald Ford is a nice guy. A little bit too much of an insider, probably, but you know, he's doing the best he can. He's kind of thrown into it. He does pardon Nixon famously. I tend to like Gerald Ford as a president. Like, he was a modest guy who was bipartisan. But still, like, you know, I'm not sure about pardoning Nixon. I know that kind of had to happen, but it still rubs me a little bit the wrong way. In retrospect, maybe like the more I think about it, I guess maybe it was probably what a necessary evil to do. But regardless, I'm not that enthusiastic about Ford. But Jimmy Carter on the other side. Jimmy Carter does seem like a solid candidate. Seems like a humble guy. He's a peanut farmer, experience in state politics. He kind of rose up, you know, self-made dude who was a successful governor of Georgia. A dark horse. Nobody really saw him coming. A Southerner who is also compassionate in terms of, like, you know, he's like, oh, wow, he's anti-racist, and he's from Georgia in the 70s. That's refreshing. So lots of empathy there. I'm very torn on this election. This is one where I'm just like, I want to vote for Jimmy. My heart seems like that's in the right place. In the chat, I can tell you, it looks like most of you are for Carter as well. There's a few Ford supporters there. Let's see what else the super chat here. Toronto Transit Channel says this quote is why Gerald Ford lost. Oh yeah. Also, you turned off the weekend. Okay, let me paste that here. I'm Gerald Ford and you're not. Oh, he also had some stumbles with the, you know, essentially the not really knowing what was going on with foreign policy, like saying some stupid things with foreign policy. However, he does run with Bob Dole. His running mate is Bob Dole, and that is Carter has Mondale with him. I like Bob Dole a lot. I'm from Kansas. Bob Dole's a senator from Kansas. I think that gives Gerald Ford the edge. I think I'm gonna go ahead and go with Gerald Ford in 1976. I know that might surprise some of you, but I think because of that, I'm seeing a lot of peanuts and emojis in the chat. Lots of Carter support. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm voting for Ford and Bob Dole in 76. History Hub, I love your channel. You are so awesome. No matter how you feel, always know that you are loved and appreciated. Oh man, that's so nice of you to say. Thank you. It sounds like you might have a channel as well. I'll have to check that out. But thank you for the kind words. Carter Prairie Fire Kowalaski from Nebraska says Carter winning Iowa primary set a trend for sure. You betcha it did. Made Iowa like a bigger deal. Although Iowa is overrated. If you've seen my video about that, I explain why. Okay, so most of you want Carter, but I went for Ford. That was a tough one. That's another one that was very, like, either one. Like, Jimmy Carter winning in 76, I'm like, okay, I'm cool with that. That's fine, too. I was just a Bob Dole fan. Let's go to 1980. Another interesting election to me. We are almost there. So reminder that if you just started watching midway through, I'm not going to go beyond 1996 because 2000 was the first election I actually voted in. Okay, is anybody still watching? I guess some people are. Let's see. Okay. Oh, still have a lot of people watching. Thank you for joining me tonight. So, in 1980, this is the year before I was born. So, if I was alive, I would have been dealing with another crazy time in American history. We have stagflation that's been going on for many years. So, that's high unemployment mixed with high inflation. The economy is stagnant. We have the Iranian hostage crisis that's going on that's just madness. We have Jimmy Carter is not really that inspiring, not that charismatic, frankly. Um, he's a socially conservative guy who is trying to appeal a lot to them, evangelicals. He's an evangelical president. He's also somebody who is deregulation. I actually like a lot of the deregulation stuff, frankly. I do like that part of him. He's also, though, he uses his Christianity more for like the hippie version of Jesus. And so he's like, we need to be more compassionate and really remember our New Deal programs we take for granted already. We need to make sure that we continue to fund those because a lot of states were starting to say maybe we should re-examine these New Deal programs that are still around, that New Deal legacy. So he was sensitive to that. And then we, of course, have his opponent. Now, Ronald Reagan had been, there he is. Ronald Reagan, by 1980, was a superstar, frankly. Ronald Reagan was a actor for many years, but then became governor of California. And he just was a natural when it came to politics, very charismatic person. Should have been really the nominee in 1976 for the Republicans, but Ford was able to come out on top with that one. So Ronald Reagan he has a lot of momentum because things aren't going well under Jimmy Carter. And then there's John Anderson, who's the wild card, and they're the third party candidate who actually has quite a bit of support. He is the moderate guy. Let's go back to John Anderson. Not many people know about John Anderson. John Anderson, if you go back and watch some of his debate, like he was invited on a debate with Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter refused to show up. He didn't want legitimacy for John Anderson. But if you go back and watch that debate, John Anderson makes a lot of sense. He makes a lot of sense. He is a guy who is just really one of the most pragmatic presidential candidates I've ever seen. And no nonsense. Like he's not trying to appeal to tradition or appeal to, I don't know. It was refreshing to like watch some of his stuff. And so I challenge you to go back and watch some of that stuff. Now, Reagan does seem appealing to me as well in 1980. Things are not going well. And Reagan said in 1980, hey, are you better off? You need to ask yourself, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And most Americans would say no. And so okay, I get you. What are you saying in the chat for 1980? Still a lot of Carter support, surprisingly. Okay. Some support for John B. Anderson, who was somebody who left the Republican. He was actually he ran as a third party guy because he's like, Reagan is a little bit too much of a limited government guy for me, but Carter's a little bit too much to the left. All right, Eugene Butler says, should the Republican Party move past Reaganomics? I think so. We've given Reaganomics 40 years, and it hasn't. It's had problems. Let's be honest. Was Reagan good at debating? Absolutely. BP Plays says that. Yes, absolutely he was. Toronto Transit Channel says Carter's presidency was underrated and frankly overshadowed mainly by the Iran hostage crisis. Unfortunately, Reagan got a lot of credit for Carter's actions. That's a good point. You made a good point. I tend to agree. I think Carter gets too much harsh treatment. And Carter, again, just a wonderful human being. He's done a lot of great work since his presidency. Corey W. says 3 hours with Mr. Bean on a Sunday night is a night well spent. Got to stick with Carter. Thank you, Corey. A lot of Carter support here, but I am seeing more and more Reagan support. Reagan has the worst social policy of any president. Wow, pretty split here. Somebody said D's nuts in 80. Well, he was not a candidate in 1980. Trump? It wasn't. No, okay. He was alive. Okay, I'm seeing more Reagan support. Yeah, in 1980, I would have gone with John Anderson. And maybe you're not surprised because I'm like the enlightened centrist guy. But Patrick Lucy was his running mate. If you don't know who Patrick Lucy is, I don't blame you. Patrick Lucy is was just he was the governor of Wisconsin. Uh, wow, he only passed away a few years ago. I guess same with John Anderson. He 4 years ago. Yeah. Anyway, so I would have gone with them. Now Reagan dominated. He easily won my home state of Kansas. But I would have been the heck with it. I'm like I'm gonna go for this third party on this election. Okay, so some of you agree with me. Jackson Sutton, Reagan destroyed Carter in the debates. I think he did. Reagan definitely debated well. So, and the country was ready for a dramatic change, and they got it with Reagan. I think he was the right man for the right time. So, anyway, 1984, let's jump ahead. The economy has gotten better. That's a big one. Okay, now it's up. Reagan has had a pretty solid 4 years to a point where there's former Democrats. Oh, there's me. I'm alive. Yeah, I'm 3 years old at this. My third birthday is the election of 1980. But Reagan it's been going well. My parents were big Reagan fans. He converts a lot of Democrats to his side. Government is not the solution. Government is the problem. That really rang true with they saw all the inefficiencies and all the things that had gone wrong, the unintended consequences of government, including warfare. And he was trying to. Now his rhetoric, he talked tough. You dirty communist, yeah. But at the same time, he was working with the Soviet Union. He was trying to sneakily work towards peace, ending the Cold War. Meatball Play says, "Hey, I have a like pin from. Well, I have an Ike pin from '52, and it's cool. Hey, I have one too. Back there, I do. I like Ike. Yeah, it's worth some money. Don't lose it. Okay, so who do you want in 1984? Oh, there's Jesse Jackson. Yeah, first African American had a good chance to win. Walter Mondale, the Democratic candidate, he is the running mate, or was the vice president for Jimmy Carter. I do not think he was another terrific guy. Don't get me wrong, one of the best vice presidents we've ever had. Another nice Minnesota guy like Hubert Humphrey, but I just don't think he was the best candidate the Democrats could have ran. I think they should have gone more with more of a wild card against the very popular Reagan. Their wild card, of course, was her, the first female candidate in American history, Geraldine Ferraro. So making history there. Geraldine Ferraro, why not? What else are you going to do against Reagan? All right, so a lot of you are actually Mondale supporters here in 1984, but you got to think economically. BB Plays says Reagan equals best. Zane Rosler says Reagan escalated the war on drugs, causing the government to push tough on crimes laws we suffer with today. Yes, that is true. Lucas C says AIDS epidemic. Yep. That's something now that was just starting. You saw more of his inaction the second term. Remember, 1984, it was still fairly new, like what's going on here. In 1984, I would have been sympathetic to Mondale. I would have been very skeptical of Reagan on social issues, but I think I still would have went ahead and went with Ronald Reagan in 1984. And George H.W. Bush, again, as his running mates, continuing to be vice president. This was one of those elections where I was like, okay, I don't think Mondale would have changed the crappy war on drugs. I think he would have kept it the same. That was kind of the culture of the time. Same with the AIDS epidemic. So you got to remember, just because somebody's crappy on something, that their opponent doesn't mean their opponent's going to be any better. So that's my justification for going ahead and sticking with Reagan in 1984 when the most important thing, the economy was getting better. Yep, Matt Wolverton, thanks for the super chat, says, it's the economy, stupid. Yep, that's the quote. That's true. That's where, and that's why, let's look at the map here, 1980, 1984. Look at how ridiculous that is. Imagine that happening today. Imagine that happening in the 2024 election coming up. Where, I mean, Mondale barely, and I mean barely, won his home state. And then he won D.C. because D.C. is always Democratic by far. It's just crazy time. Okay. 1988 was the first election that I remember as a child. I remember seeing George H.W. Bush on the stage debating Michael Dukakis, the Democrat. Remember, George H.W. Bush was the vice president under Reagan all 8 years. Pretty solid guy, lots of experience. My parents, of course, had a huge influence on me. Like I said, they were, I mean, all parents have a big influence on their kids. And so, yeah, I being alive in 1988, I think George H.W. Bush was appealing. Almost in many ways like taking the good stuff of Reagan and being more moderate, appealing more to Democrats. And so that to me was like, I think, yeah, H.W. Bush isn't so bad. Dukakis, though, you know, came across as a pretty compassionate guy, almost too compassionate. That whole death penalty thing was ridiculous. I hopefully would have saw right through that crap. But Martin Rio says Reagan negotiated with terrorists. Yeah, that happens. Not just him. Jack Espino says Iran-Contra was one of the worst scandals in American history, in my opinion. It was bad, yeah. But how much was George H.W. Bush involved with that? That's a question. Sam Werdeman says, my grandma worked for Mondale. Mad respect for this guy. Shame his strategy was just to be an adult in the room. Yeah. Okay, I feel you. Ethan Sommer, a lot of Reagan haters in the comments. Ethan Sommer says Reagan was pretty racist and used many dog whistles to win the election. I mean, dog whistles is always one of those things. It's like, do you really know it was a dog whistle? Or was it an accidental thing? I don't know. Yeah, it's looking like a lot of people are for Dukakis. Carlos Camijo says, keep in mind that even the most progressive Democrats were socially conservative back then in the 80s. Exactly, Carlos. You get it. That was the point I was trying to make earlier. Zane Rossler again says, Ann Richards' DNC speech equals boss. I loved Ann Richards. She was terrific. Yeah, I'm glad you brought her up in that speech. JJ says, how can you vote for lefties like the Roosevelt and Debs and yet you vote for Reagan in 84? That's not very consistent in your economics. In terms of supply side economics, I think that I go back and forth between supply side economics and more government involvement in economics. And that's simply based on the times. Like if you're fighting inflation, like Reagan was, there's a time to fight inflation. If there's more of a time to fight unemployment, there's more of a time to fight unemployment. I'm not a partisan guy. That's all there is to it. Cold War 45, I'd been a Bush guy in 88. He wasn't a hard ideologue like Reagan, though Quell on the ticket was a pretty bad idea. I'm glad you brought that up. Dan Quell was something that really makes me hesitant to vote for George H.W. Bush in 88. I would not have been a fan of Dan Quell. I'm like, who is this guy? Look at him. Look at him. Okay. Dukakis, though, was kind of phony as well. Like, he was one of those guys that it just seemed like my choices weren't that exciting after, several years of more exciting choices, I guess. And so I think this would have been another tough one, but I think if Dukakis won, I've been like, okay, that's fine. But ultimately, I think I would have gone with George H.W. Bush and sucked it up with Dan Quell as the vice president. And they did win. So what do you think in the comments? Do you disagree with me? It looks like a lot of you are pushing for pretty split. Oh, Ron Paul. Yeah, that's right. Ron Paul ran in 1988. I would have been sympathetic to Ron Paul in 1988 as well. I definitely would have. As the Libertarian candidate. I'm glad you brought up Ron Paul. He didn't have any chance in heck to win. So I guess I could have been talked into Ron Paul in 1988. So thank you for bringing him up. Looks like a lot of you, though, are split on this one, Dukakis or Bush. For the record, I'm anti-death penalty. I'll get into that some other time, maybe. Oh, some people said Biden in 1980. I forget that Joe Biden first ran for president in 1988. Okay, let's move on to 1992. Again, one of my favorite elections. This really is. And this is the one where I first got into it. A classic three-way race. A race where all three candidates, okay. You got to remember in the 90s, the country was still mostly on the same page. Like, we weren't as nearly as divided. So the factions that did develop were more superficial. Like, Americans agreed way more than they disagreed on most issues, by far. Even in the 80s, this was the case. And that's why you saw so much crossover from Democrats to Republicans, a lot of Democrats supporting Reagan. That's why that was. George H.W. Bush, of course, the biggest thing that he did that hurt his chances for re-election was raising taxes, but mostly on the super rich here we're talking, okay? Mostly the super rich were affected by this, so keep that in mind. The Persian Gulf War, look at that, 89%. He took that. I mean, that's a war that you could justify much more than the later Iraq War. I think overall he was pretty level-headed. George H.W. Bush was, I don't know. I think he was, I would say, an average president. Didn't. I know that, like, he kind of came across as out of touch and elitist. I get that. Let's see what you're saying so far. Liam Henson says, my great-grandmother dated Strom Thurmond back in the day. Oh, that's an interesting factoid. Okay, then we got Bill Clinton, who is this rising star in the Democratic Party. Oh, Bob Kerrey, yeah. Yeah, he would have been a good one. Bill Clinton from Arkansas, another Southern Democrat like Jimmy Carter. So it's like, oh, I can appeal to the Southern evangelicals. He's a Baptist. Liam Henson. No, okay. Who's that? Somebody else comment. Who was that? I missed it. Some of the super chats I missed. I apologize. Oh, here it is. Insert alias here, formerly known as Woodrow Wilson. I agree with Perot overall, except maybe on NAFTA. Okay. So Bill Clinton agreed with George H.W. Bush on most issues. There wasn't really too much disagreement there. Of course, by this time, abortion had become a wedge issue. Different opinions on immigration. Economically, though, Clinton and Bush are pretty similar. That's where Ross Perot comes in. Ross Perot was somebody who was more of a protectionist. And I'm not a protectionist guy. I'm more about, like, free trade. But NAFTA that doesn't mean that NAFTA was perfect. There were issues with NAFTA, and I can kind of see why Perot was against it. The biggest appeal for me for Ross Perot is he's an outsider. He's not a politician. He's not a DC insider dude when I say outsider, he's a billionaire like who buys his way into this thing. Okay, I get it. That's not really outsider. But him like getting on TV and just talking to the American people directly like about things that like we really care about and mostly all revolving around the economy. Like he sounded like a liberal guy in some instances. He talked about how we shouldn't be policing the world. He was very similar to Pat Buchanan's platform. Like, I guess you could say later on in some regards Trump's, but he was definitely less on the divisive rhetoric. And, you know, he was pragmatic again, somebody who kind of cut through the bull crap, like say, hey, this is the way things should be. We shouldn't sugarcoat it. I liked Ross Perot a lot. And even as a kid, I did. Like, I was like, Mom, Dad, this guy makes sense. And my parents were more Bush supporters. They voted for Bush. But if I was able to vote in 92, I would have voted for Ross Perot and his running mate, James Stockdale. If you forgot who James Stockdale was. James Stockdale was a Vietnam War prisoner of war. He was a war hero. Look at all that. He essentially was also another outsider. Kind of said things that made it clear that he didn't know what he was talking about sometimes, but that's okay. But yeah, look at that. Ross Perot, a man of the people. Like, there to fix all the corruption, fight the special interests. What do you think in the chat? What do you think? Seeing a lot of Perot supporters. Also seeing a lot of Clinton supporters and a for Bush. We're all over the place with this, aren't we? All right. Peter Russell says Perot would have won if he didn't drop out. I agree. The fact that he dropped out, which is kind of suspicious how he dropped out and then just returns at the last minute, that was crazy. Martin Rios, thoughts on Al Gore and why he never ran again, even though the Democrats who lost in the past ran again like Biden. I think Al Gore was kind of sick of politics, frankly. His new mission, once he became like this new ambassador for like, and that's the way he views himself, as ambassador to fight climate change. I think there's no way to go back. Matthew Pilevsky says, next live stream, will you do an updated presidential tier list? I'll think about it. It might be too soon since Trump left office. I don't know if I'm comfortable putting him in there yet. Cold War 45 says, history vindicated Perot on NAFTA. He talked of the sound of sucking, and indeed, many good paying jobs relocated to Mexico. Yeah, he spoke up right to what people cared about. Perot, 92 and 96. Shame Buchanan took over the mantle of the Reform Party in 2000. Yeah, I mean, Ross Perot was like Pat Buchanan, but more uniting. He took all the good parts of Pat Buchanan. I think he would have been a great president, frankly. So glad to see a lot of you agree with me, but there's also a lot of Bill Clinton support. Now remember, in 1992, the economy was set back as well. The economy was there was a little recession in the early 90s. We forget that. All right, this will be the last one I do, 1996. Because I'm not doing any elections that I actually voted in. You'll just have to guess which ones I actually did. So 1996, I was watching Beavis and Butthead. That's why I put this in the video. 1996, I would have been in middle school, and I would have been kind of involved in politics. Like, I remember talking with my best friend Zach on the bus passionately about this election. He was a big Bill Clinton supporter. I was a big Bob Dole supporter, mostly because of my parents. But yeah, like, Ross Perot's around again. This time Ross Perot doesn't have near the support that he did in 1992. But the overall thing is the economy's gotten better. The 90s were a fairly prosperous time. Not only that, Bill Clinton is reaching across the aisle. He's a very centrist. He's a new way Democrat, which is a centrist Democrat, very neoliberal. He has a budget surplus every year by the end of his term. Things are getting better overall for the country. Doesn't mean there aren't still a lot of problems. He's a conservative sometimes on some issues, but other times he sounds pretty left-leaning. Bill Clinton, of course, is more known for his personal scandals, but that didn't happen until after 1996. Remember, 1996 is before Monica Lewinsky, before the impeachment, the second impeachment in American history. Let's see what you're saying so far. Cold War 45. Once again, man, thanks for all your support tonight. Says, fun fact, Perot is the last third-party candidate to win a county in a state. Yep, he won a few counties, I think, in 92. Sam Rowe says, just got home from work at QT in Raytown and so happy to see your KC shirt. Represent. How are you feeling about the Royals? I'm feeling pretty good about the Royals. They're off to a fantastic start. Better than I thought they would. Eugene Butler again, in politics, what did people disagree on in the 90s? It was mostly social issues. It was mostly abortion, immigration. Those are the two big. This is when like the border wall became a thing. When Clinton was like, he was the main one who built the border wall. And it was like gay marriage was becoming a thing, like an issue, like a drug policy. Like, remember, Clinton was pretty conservative on like the war on drugs continuing as well. People don't realize how conservative Bill Clinton was in many ways. So yeah, most Americans were in agreement. So Bob Dole comes around again. By this time he's an older guy, but he's hipper than ever. Favorite son. I'm a big Bob Dole fan. I've seen him in person many times. There is a building named after him within walking distance from where I live. And then Ross Perot, I'm leaning again towards Ross Perot, but then Bob Dole comes around. His running mate is Jack Kemp, another popular politician, former football star, I believe. Matthew Podleski says, will you at least tell us who you voted for in 2000 since it's not as a divisive topic like it used to be? It's still very divisive. That's 2000, I always say, is the beginning point of the current divided times that we live in. I think that's when it all started. So I don't feel comfortable sharing with it. I'm sorry, not yet at least. Plus, like, yeah, I don't know. Okay, so looks like who do you think should have won this election? I'm not seeing a lot of people are just saying. I'm seeing a few Perot and Clinton. Yeah, remember the economy had gotten a lot better. That's the most important thing in every election. I'm still seeing a lot of Perot. Pat Buchanan. Bob Dole is still alive. He is still kicking it in his 90s, believe it or not. I'm seeing a few Dole. Okay, I would have actually went with Bob Dole in this one. I would have, at this point, I would have been like, okay, Ross Perot, you had your chance. It didn't go very well. Just give it up, buddy. The Reform Party now, I get it. But plus, Bob Dole from my home state. And, you know, he's close to my heart. So that's who I would have voted for. Looks like I might be in the minority based on the chat. All right. So that will do it. That brings us to the end. I did not think this was going to last so long. This has been 3 hours and 20 minutes. And I'm about to lose my voice. I got to teach this week. So I got to go to the bathroom. But this has been so much fun. Let me make sure I don't have any more super chats before I go. Bob Dole push against gun control. To push against gun control, Joseph Dutton. I'm a big Second Amendment guy, so that's never really bothered me too much. I can see some reasonable gun control, definitely. Nathaniel Thrush, my guess for you. Gore, Bush, Obama, Romney, Gary Johnson, Biden. I'd be Dem for every election. Okay. Interesting choices there. No comments. Mason Everlast, thank you. My mother was a Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden voter. Interesting. She's never been wrong in an election yet. Wow. She's got a good pulse of the nation, Mason. You tell her that. Matthew Pavlesky says, do you see... Thanks for all your support. I've seen your name up a lot. Do you see any politician today that can somehow unite this divided country? Yes. Andrew Yang. I've said that before on a live stream. I think he's that type to bring Republican support over. Maybe Tulsi Gabbard, but... she's too unpopular on the Democratic side, unfortunately. And maybe somebody like Pete Buttigieg or, I don't know, Nikki Haley, maybe. Maybe Nikki Haley. Boy, I'm always going to make somebody mad. Yeah, Bob Dole does have cancer. We wish him the best. He's been fighting cancer for at least a couple months now. User 3937 does Epstein didn't kill himself. That might be a good way to end this. Oh, hold on. Here, let me take this off the screen here and... Oh, crap. Okay. Yeah, there we go. When I switched the thing, my mic turned off. Gotta switch the screens again. I'm sorry. I'm losing my voice anyway. I was just saying that responding to David D'Amico, I love your videos as a Clevelander. I was just saying, like, sometimes when you're just saying the the facts of of two cities, it can make it seem like you're being negative, but I try to be uplifting at the end of that video, and I apologize for making it sound bad. Jack L, fantastic stream. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you so much for that donation. Definitely going to get your book after this. Have a good one. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Ethan Ellis says, also Nikki Haley is basically just George W. Bush in a dress. Quote, hashtag never Haley. Jason Papagiannis says, any advice for a medieval history student who found himself in a 600 level American electoral history class? Watch my videos, I guess. There are lots of good resources on YouTube, seriously, for that. Crash Course has some good stuff, too. Their government series. McConaughey versus Abbott in Texas. Matthew McConaughey. That's an exciting one to see. Yeah, definitely. Mason Everlast. Oh, okay, I already said that one. Okay, there's one that I missed because my mic was muted, so I apologize for that. A lot of DeSantis fans. Yeah, I think he has a better chance than any of the other Republican candidates at this point. Well, I said every election that I was not alive for. I had to shorten the title, but if you look at the description of the video, I said that it would end before the elections that I first voted in. Stay muted and go to bed. Okay. Insert alias here, formerly known as Woodrow Wilson. I think Winfield Scott had a lot of potential. I would agree with that. All right. I really take issue with you giving credit to politicians solely from being from your state. You're way too smart for that. You would be surprised, like the power of the favorite son phenomenon. KCK or KCMO? KCK, because that's where most of my wife's family's from. Top Dom, thanks for the donation. Andrew Alt, finally I'm home from work, was on break when I donated earlier. What's up? Thank you for donating. I'm keeping this posted on my channel so you can go back and watch the whole thing, even though there were a couple technical difficulties, as there always are. So I apologize for that. Emily Lou, do you think the GOP latching on Trump will be their downfall? I do think it's something that will hurt them long term. Yeah, I mean, just look at the polling data. Republican support has dwindled in recent years, and if you're going to blame someone, you got to blame him, because he's been the face of the Republican Party for 4 or 5 years now. So all right, Jeb 2024. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here since it's been 3.5 hours. Franklin Roosevelt's a big Jeb supporter. All right, I want to thank you all for watching tonight. This has been a lot of fun. I do have to go to bed because it's a school night, and I hope I didn't miss any super chats, but thank you for your support. It's been unreal, and hopefully we can do this again soon. So please clap. And Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. So thank you for watching.